Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce you all to rape survivor and whistleblower, certified phlebotomist and medical assistant, photographer, music and concert lover, dog and pittie petitionist, artist, cannabis connoisseur, and survivor advocate, Caitlin. I met Caitlin on Twitter recently and was instantly in awe of her. In a world where it is frightening and risky to speak your truth aloud and publicly, Caitlin struck me in her convictions of pressing forward with exposing her abuse, her abuser, and what she's experienced and witnessed firsthand, and it's very difficult to not feel a deep sense of admiration for her. In Caitlin's freshman year of high school, around the time of January 2011, she was approached by a man named Kevin Ahern online on Facebook after seeing him pop up as a mutual friend. From that point on, heavy grooming began after relentless requests to meet with her. Caitlin eventually gave in. She met with Kevin 2 times, and both times she was raped. After the second time, there was severe pain, and Caitlin refrained from seeing him again despite his relentless text messages and phone calls. She tried to move on and avoid what happened by keeping it a secret, and boy, was she good at keeping a secret. On the outside, you would have never guessed something horrific happened to her. She pursued art and photography and excelled in the latter. She passed off bad grades as being rebellious and tried to seem as normal as possible. After bottling up her emotions for so long and hiding what happened, she experienced a mental breakdown which included psychosis. Despite the terror she was facing with delusions and hallucinations at times, she still went and reported her rape to law enforcement. For the first time in her life, she was forced to deal with what happened to her. Investigators would come to her house and question or discuss things with her, and soon her case was picked up by a district attorney. Like most rape cases, it dragged on for a few years until 2018 when trial commenced. Caitlin had to testify, and the outcome concluded in victory with 7 guilty counts of sexual offenses for the verdict. There was only one problem, though. Kevin Ahern was missing and had absconded. He skipped out on bail. The turmoil and trauma Caitlin was facing took time to learn how to deal with. Miraculously, she has not had psychosis or psychosis-related symptoms since 2018, for 6 years now, which she takes credit to taking care of her mental health. The combination of trauma and mental health paved the way for crazy experiences in Los Angeles as an adult. Having dealt with everything from the music industry to the healthcare industry, Caitlin has a lot to say about the things she has dealt with in her life and the secrets she thinks should come to light as well. At the end of 2023, she started to find the courage to speak out about what happened to her. After being featured on Soft White Underbelly's podcast, new doors were beginning to open. She is slowly coming out of her shell of being so shy and is ready to take on the world and country that seems to excuse pedophilia. She also has began connecting with other survivors as well. Caitlin is an absolute inspiration, and her story today is important for many reasons. One reason being that it goes to show how heinous abuse and injustice doesn't only occur in generational abuse families and can, in fact, happen to anyone. And reason number 2 being that we can all learn so much from someone like Caitlin, who was thrown into the depths of hell that were meant to destroy, only to emerge as an ignited flame that is now lighting the way for other victims and survivors to reclaim their voice and strength of spirit again. Caitlin, in every sense of the word, is a hero. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast as a guest, or sharing your information privately with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. You can also use this email if you'd like to be a part of my new book series featuring written survivor testimonies, and you can find the video with all the details on how to submit your testimony on any of my podcast channels. And lastly, I'd love your support on Substack, where I've taken up investigative journalism as an outlet for me to share about the podcast, guests, and my advocacy work. And you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All my links are in the show notes, and I love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for caring so deeply about survivors and whistleblowers, and for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor and whistleblower disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, walking miracle, voice for the voiceless, anti-child and dog abuse advocate, survivor, overcomer, inspiration, hero, and someone I'm grateful to call my new friend, the one, the only, Caitlin. Caitlin, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I do want to say I'm so thankful for people like you that are giving people a voice and people an opportunity to speak about what they went through. So again, thank you for having me today.
It's an honor. I knew that these stories were important in my heart whenever I started this podcast, and that's why I started it, because I was like, why is nobody, sharing these actual testimonies? Like, where's the survivors and whistleblowers getting a platform to talk about this stuff? Why is everybody talking over them and talking for them, And the more that I started podcasting, I realized that these stories aren't just important, they're the most important thing that we need to talk about, and the one thing that we're not. I loved in your bio how you had wrote that you're speaking on behalf and for a country and world that excuses pedophilia. Like, it really does. Like, people know it exists and they just kind of look away, and I feel it's the people that find testimonies and will actually sit through one. It touches your heart when you actually hear it from the survivor instead of the politician or the third party charity worker that's making tons of money off of the cause, and not really doing anything to help. It really strikes you in the heart just to hear how this stuff actually works, and it really hits close to home. So it's an honor to have you on. Your story, for me, we were talking before we started recording, I am over a decade older than you. I'm so amazed at how incredible you are at your very young age, and how healed you are, and how many lifetimes you've already lived, and just your strength and courage, your warrior spirit. I'm amazed at that. And I try to think back, when all this happened to you, if I would have had the internet at my disposal at that age, it frightens me. I felt like chills go down my spine. I'm thinking, gosh, that would have been me. Like, that would have easily been me getting, somehow roped into something online with my curiosity and just all the technological accessibility that kids have these days. And I think your story can really reach a lot of people, because there's more people that, have children, are growing up in this time. Like, this is just the world that we live in, that we have to now worry about logging onto our computers and, being victimized, where before it might have been going down the street, going to school, which are all still, very dangerous things. But now, like, we can't even go on our phone or internet without having to worry about that. So I think the story is really important, and it's an honor to have you on. And I thought maybe we'd start. One of the interesting things about your family is you're not from a generational satanic or cult family. You have a very different upbringing, and this, goes to show that this stuff can happen to anybody. So I'd love to turn it over to you and to go back in time, and I'd love for you to talk about your family and your childhood and your upbringing a little bit.
Yeah, okay. So from birth, I was adopted. I was adopted by a family that was really loving and, really wanted to have children, but couldn't have children on their own. Um, and the type of, I think a lot of adoptions are different in the US because it depends on what agency you use. And the specific agency that my parents and my mother used, uh, was very thorough with these types of things in adoption. They didn't just hand me over. There was therapy appointments on both sides. There was psychologists, talking to them, and just a long process of seeing, are these people capable of bringing up a child, and do they have the background that is able. And so eventually, I was born. My parents, I call my parents, my adoptive parents, were there. Um, and after I was in the hospital, my adoptive parents took me home. And that was from then on. I was in a very loving family. My childhood was very good. I was an only child. I didn't have any siblings, although on my birth family side, I do have like half siblings and things like that, but that's a separate thing. So, I was an only child, and I went to a private Christian school that was attached to a church that was also a Baptist Christian church. And I was there all the way up to right before high school. And one thing I would say is that produced a lot of kind of religious trauma, even though I've come out of that a long way because that was so long ago. But from a very young age, you know, even in preschool, not preschool, sorry, kindergarten, and first grade, second grade, third grade. I mean, I was used to being told that like if you don't repent, you will die and you will die and go to hell, and this will happen to you, and this, the details, all this stuff, and I think as a kid, that's a little bit, like whoa, like I don't know if children should be that, I think there should be a little room there to kind of, if, I don't know how to explain that because, from a young age, I was okay, I turned my life over to God, and, I tried to be the best Christian I could be. But then when I got into middle school, things started to change. So like in seventh and eighth grade, like I started to listen to different kinds of music and just paint my nails, things like that, like innocent things that, children start, or, preteens start getting into, like just, you know, regular, regular teen things. I don't know how to explain it. And my school, including my peers, really took that as like oh, she's not really a good Christian. She's not really Christian, maybe even, and I tried so hard. I would go to, Wednesday groups for the kids and the teens. I would go to church on Sundays a lot because I had friends that had teachers that worked at the school and stuff. And I was trying so hard to appeal to my peers and the people in my teachers and the priests and all that stuff. And it obviously, it didn't work. And by the end of my eighth grade year, I had been bullied severely by like my peers and also my teachers. It's absolutely insane. And there were so many things said to me before I left that school that was just so, you know, incredibly like, losing friends and things like that. But it's like the way it would happen is it's like they would send me letters and be like, you're not Christian enough for this, and this reason. So therefore, I can't be your friend, and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And it was really like fucking weird. Like, and teachers would say shit to me, or I would hear from my friends, since their parents were teachers, what was being said in the lounges, what was being said behind closed doors about me. Of course, people talk shit about me when I was a kid for some damn reason, like get a life shit, Um, and then eventually those friends abandoned me too with those kinds of letters. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I told my parents, I can't take this anymore. I'm not okay, I want to go to a different high school. So I did go to a different high school. I went from a small private Christian school to a public high school, and this is in LA. And so even from there was like a little bit of culture shock,
I bet.
yeah. So I mean, to preface this too, I think a lot of people, when I did my soft white underbelly interview, said like, oh, at 14 you should know this type of shit, you should know not to do this, this, and this. But the thing was, I had come from a private Christian school that had absolutely no sex education, absolutely none. So I went into high school, public high school, and didn't know what a condom was or what you necessarily used it for. I didn't know how birth control worked. I didn't know how my own anatomy worked or how another person's anatomy worked as far as sexually, and physically like that. And in when you produce babies and things like that, I didn't know the processes that my body would even go through, let alone sex and things like that, because my school, whenever they said anything about sex or anything like that, even in health classes, they would say, oh, stay abstinent, that's the only thing you need to know. Like, we didn't delve into any of science, anything related to science at all, especially in middle school and just beyond all the years. So I went into high school not having any sex education. So that right there is a thing that, I think just fucking insane. Like, so of course, when Kevin approached me online, like when I was a freshman, I had still not gone through my health education class because it had just started that beginning of the semester in January, and we had still not hit that sex education part. And so when he contacted me, he was very like, I know how people know how abusers work and how narcissism works, and he was very appealing. He was very much like, oh, like, what kind of music do you listen to? Oh, I listen to the same music. Oh, I live here, we're so close, and blah 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 blah. Like, he went on and on and on about that type of shit. And there was a short conversation on Facebook, and then he was like, here's my number, we should text. And he also eventually also when he texted me, he gave me his AIM messenger. So that's how far back we're going into technology era. The
How old
flip
were you,
phone.
Caitlin? Like, whenever you started using technology, how old were you?
Oh man. I was probably like, okay, probably like sixth grade to like middle school. But obviously, I was born in 96, so I grew up when computers were just starting to be a thing. So of course I played little online computer games, like little Disney stuff, and like they would have those little discs where you can put it in and play a little game, and stuff like that. I would do stuff like that on the computer. And then once I hit like 13, 14, or like 12, 13, 14, I actually, one thing that happened was my private school, I don't know how they did this, but they had some sort of like deal with Apple where they were trying to set us kids up with a personal Apple laptop. Like, they would say, oh, we have a deal, like if you buy it through us, then you blah 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 blah. Like, they made it sound appealing to the parents and everything. It's like, oh, they can use this for school, they can use this for da 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 da. There's parental controls and everything like that. And so my parents gave into that and bought me a computer. So that was during middle school, right before middle school probably. So that's when I started like going on the internet and seeing all types of shit, and like, introduced to MySpace and then introduced to Facebook. And like, I was definitely like on the internet. And it's so funny because when I talk to people my age, and I'm 27, it's so funny because everybody else was like, yeah, we all had like unsupervised stuff
Yeah.
to be on the internet. Like, we all could like do that, because parents back then, I don't think they were thinking of that type of stuff. Like, it's just very odd. I don't know if you've ever seen those memes on TikTok, but there are literally kids making memes about being groomed on Facebook, when I started seeing that shit, I was like, oh wow, I cannot have an original experience. Like that's so sad. Like like I would love to have been the only person that was stupid or something like that, but I'm not. So that right there, that's how I got on the internet for sure. And then it just snowballed from there. I got into a lot of stuff, just being on the internet.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting to me, and something I think that, the world is still really behind on is understanding that there's dangers online, but the boom happens so quick and it just has never stopped. Like it becomes more and more difficult every year to like control, what people are able to see. There's even, videos of like, war online and stuff where you're actually like watching people dying, and there's no controls. Like it's just you can go on Twitter and see it, and it's like, oh my gosh. And I try to, like I said, I try to think about, the internet didn't really like start booming in my for me until I was like already in my 20s. That was kind of like when I started like going on MySpace and Facebook and stuff. And, that was the last thing I think people were thinking about was like the dangers because all that you heard was how good it was. And I think for a lot of parents too, it's almost a relief of, oh my gosh, something to entertain my child. If I'm doing something, I can just give this computer to them and it'll occupy them and I can go do what I'm gonna do. And a lot of times there's like very little supervision. It's not something that parents do with their kids. It's something that parents do to distract their kids so they can go do something without having to worry about, the child crying or even like a teenage kid, like being loud or whatever it is, or just, talking. So I think it's really interesting, like I said, that you were somebody that had one of these experiences, especially on Facebook, because to me, I think like Facebook too is looked at as more of like the wholesome platform in a sense, to where it's like where you connect with your high school friends. That's kind of, what the development was like a way to keep in touch with like your close circle. And I think primarily that's sort of how it operates. But, there are a lot I get all the time. Like anytime I click on somebody's profile, there's a list of like, here's your mutual friends. Do you want to friend any of these people? And it comes up and you kind of looking, it's like, oh, I have all these mutual friends of this person. They're from my hometown or they're from somewhere that where I lived, and it's sort of, I don't want to say like tempting, but like you look at stuff like that and you realize like how the 6 degrees of separation can be really short for a predator. They can easily target somebody by like saying certain things on their profile, like putting a demographic or a location of where they want to scout people. And then obviously having the savvy of being a groomer, which is also something, you brought up going to this Christian school, and that's really sad that you were treated that way. And I think in a lot of church settings, that is what the problem is. Like we have Satanists and Freemasons and abusers and, cult members running and being in churches that just get to go. There's nobody that says anything about them. Yet you have a kid that puts nail polish on and they're outcasted. And it's like, what is going on here? Like, we should be judging people by their fruits, not by an appearance. Like, what are these people doing behind the scenes? Like, what are they contributing to society? Are they good people? Do they have a good heart? And it's backwards a lot of times in these religious establishments. We accept and let danger in and we outcast people who are really good people. Even survivors have trouble going to church because they can't even share their story about satanic ritual abuse, yet the pastor running the church is doing rituals on holidays and on ritual nights and full moons, and it's scary. So I love that you brought attention to that because that's something I think a lot of people struggle with. And so going back to, and you can add more to that, did you have something that you wanted to say
Oh
regarding?
yeah, like one thing I want to say about my specific situation for this specific church and school is that what I think they were personally doing was using Christianity as kind of like a blanket for doing other things financially. That's my theory. Because as soon as I left that school, they just kept buying up more and more property. For some reason, they had the funds and everything to just buy up more property and take up more, places to do church things and blah blah blah. But it's like you start thinking of the financial side and it's like, well, what what is going on if they can buy So they have a thing for the corner of the street and another corner of the street, and then they bought the corner of the street like forward from there. And it's like, how are they just expanding all throughout the years? And they just don't stop. And let's not mention like they have nicer cars when they come drive in, all that type of stuff. I think that sometimes it's not even just ritual abuse. Sometimes it's just people using Christianity as like a shield to hide what they're doing behind the scenes, whether it be financial greed or like hurting children or whatever you want to think about. I think it was a lot of financial stuff with them. And
Yes.
then, when I got to high school and then Kevin like friended me and everything, it was so weird because the friends that I had started making in high school, like they were the mutual friends of him. And it's like, oh, he must be some type of like a guy that is friends with all these people, he must be safe because I have mutual friends with him. Like, let's see who it is. And then he sends really nice messages, and I'm 14. What do I know? What else were you gonna say? I thought you were gonna say something else after that too.
Well, I had sort of cut you off, so you brought us right back to where we were. So I was gonna say, could you explain who Kevin is? Like, what did his profile look like? Who did he say that he was? Who is Kevin? How old was he? Like, what are some details about him, and like what he shared with you in those beginning conversations?
So like from what I remember, those beginning conversations and like let's talk about his profile first. When I first went on his profile, like I saw that he had a lot of friends, like a lot of friends. I can't remember the number, but he had so many friends and I was like, "Oh, he met I didn't really think anything of it." And when I saw his pictures, he had many pictures with many people. And like, it's not like they were other adults, they were other kids. It's not like I kind of grasped that in that way. But I saw, he was around people that were around people that I knew, like the thing you said earlier about the 6 degrees of separation, And I looked a little bit, but when I was 14, I just there's a lot of things I don't remember about, the things that happened to because I spent so many years pushing it away and then started dealing with it later on. But from what he said in text messages and AIM, he would specifically be like more grooming on AIM than he was on text messages. And I think he did that on purpose. Like our text messages seemed somewhat innocent when, from what I remember, looking at the subpoena text messages we had from each other. But obviously, we couldn't get the AIM messages because AIM ceased to exist. Like I don't remember when, but they totally just got rid of it. And it's like you don't keep records of any of that stuff. Probably not. It's like, oh shit, thank you. Like so on AIM, he would ask like sexual questions and stuff, and I didn't really grasp that they were sexual, but I just knew that he was giving me attention, so I answered the questions. Like one of the things I said in court is like one of the like I can remember him asking me on AIM like, "Oh, are you wearing big girl panties or are you wearing like something else, or stuff like that." Like and I would just answer it like just not thinking. And you know, he was just he was so different from each platform. And it's so interesting looking back at that because on AIM it was completely like inappropriate, and then through text messages it was like more innocent, and then on Facebook it's almost like he had a persona of like, oh, look how good of a guy I am. I have so many friends that trust me, and I'm a musician and stuff like that, just so much stuff. I didn't find out he was a musician and all that until he got me in person with him. So obviously that's another thing, but.
Right. So whenever you look back, how did the grooming sort of progress? I know you said it sort of started innocent. Like, what were some of the stages that you can look at now and be like, "Oh, like I see what he did." Because obviously I'm sure he didn't come out right away and start saying sexual stuff. Like, what was sort of the time frame? Like, how long did all that take before it started to escalate?
You know, I wish I could remember the time frame of that, but from what I know of court documents and what I know of things that had happened was I think this was only in a span of a month to 2 months.
Wow.
He was very fast with it. You know, like I said in the software underbelly interview, like I don't know why I went back or whatever, but really I was just being severely groomed. Like he was very particular with it. um, from going to Facebook and then wanting to change it to text messaging because he doesn't want to do that on Facebook, and then changing it from AIM and stuff. He did that. And then he started inviting me to go out with him. So one of the first things he did was he took me to what we know is the Topanga Mall. It's somewhere I still live very nearby. He took me to the Topanga Mall and he kind of talked to me a lot about like just things that would appeal to me. Like he knew I listened to certain music, so he would say, oh, I live in Hidden Hills, that's where all the celebrities live, right? And I didn't really care about celebrities at that point, but I was just like, oh, whatever, and and then he's like, oh, like Kat Von D and who she's dating and stuff. And I was like, oh, like, well, I know of Kat Von D, she's cool, but because I listen to rock and metal and stuff like that. And he would try to like dig in to see what was appealing to me. And he would try everything. And whatever failed, he just switched to another thing. So at first, I think he wanted to appeal to me by like giving me objects and stuff. Like he took me to two different stores and he was like, if you really would like, I could buy you like what you want. Like, do you want this? Like, or oh, this looks so cute, like what do you think about it, like do you want it, and like I didn't really take any of that because I wasn't that type of person. Like I was like I don't really want to buy anything. Like I just I was more wanting an emotional connection as a kid, being bullied and all that stuff. I was wanting a friend to hear me out. I was wanting more of an emotional connection. I didn't really get groomed by riches and things like that or whatever. So then that first day when he took me to all those stores and all that stuff, he was like, "Oh, let me show you my home and stuff like in Hidden Hills." So I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't know what that could have meant, and then he starts telling me like more and weird shit that like is just interesting, like that I remember. There's certain things I remember, like I think he was trying to act as an adult that would mentor me into certain things. Like, oh, do you know about what this means? Like, I remember when we were driving away from the mall, he was telling me about another girl who he knew really well and that she was my age or something, and that she was giving him all of her stuffed animals. And looking back on that, I see like, wow, she was so fucking groomed that she didn't know how to get away from it. So it's like, here's the stuff, here's my childhood things. Like, I looking back on that, I think that is so fucking freaky, And he
How
would
old
tell me
was he?
he okay, he lied about his age to me. I don't remember what age he lied about. I think he said he was 21, but he could have said he was younger. I don't remember. But he tried to appeal to me as a younger person. And really he was in his 30s at the time. I don't remember if it was early 30s or like early 30s or mid or late, because if I think about it now, okay, so that January 2011, he was pretty much in his 30s, and as of today, he would have turned 50. So he was pretty like older.
Right. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I
Oh
can
no, it's
tell,
okay.
the whole one of the things about this story is that he's not old, but he's definitely, too old to be looking at 14-year-olds, and he's going through and like targeting specific girls. And I want you to talk about more about this experience, this first time being with him or any of the times. But do you know why he targeted you? Like, how come? Do you know of like any strategies that he had, or what appealed to him about you, versus maybe a bunch of the other girls that he was seeing on Facebook? Do you think?
I think he was specifically spotting out like people he knew were already vulnerable, like most abusers do, because I was pretty vulnerable, I think you could clearly tell from my little Facebook and stuff that I was like maybe struggling a little bit. Like I would post music I would listen to, and I would sometimes post statuses that were like, oh, frowny face, things like that. And, I don't know, maybe he when he started talking to me, he was like, oh yes, she is very like a vulnerable person. And that's what I think happened. Obviously I don't know what was happening in his mind, but it seemed from that and the other girls that I know of and knew of, it was like we were all kind of vulnerable in some ways.
100%. And did you tell your parents about any of this? Did they know anything that was going on, or what was that situation?
No, I didn't tell them any of this. I hid a lot from them when it came to the internet and things like that. And specifically meaning Kevin, I lied about that to my parents because I was like, even though I didn't know like what he was doing, I sensed that, oh my God, like my parents would never let me see a boy because I'm only like 14, like especially somebody that I didn't meet at school. So I was like, I was mostly like wanting to hide it from my parents because I was like, you know, a rebellious kid kind of, because I'd already been hiding stuff from the internet. It's like not like they would check because they weren't on the internet like that. And, I would just keep going and going. And then eventually Kevin came into my life, and then he was relentless with the way he wanted to move quickly. And I didn't have the heart to object to any of that. I didn't have the strength. All I felt I could do was go along with what he was doing and saying. So the first time he like picked me up, I lied and said, "Oh, I'm gonna go to my friend's house." And so my mom dropped me off at a friend's house, and I acted like I was going in. Luckily, it was a large kind of apartments area and townhomes. And so I just went through the gate and I started walking, and then my mom drove off. She didn't really think anything of it, I'm sure. And then Kevin came and picked me up. And so then from there, like I told you, the whole Topanga Mall thing, and then he took me to his house from there that first time. And then he did the same thing, like I'm sure the next weekend. And that's when I was like raped with the pain and everything. And I was just like, oh shit, like something's wrong here. Like I'm not talking to this guy. Like I can't do this.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. You don't have to go into detail, obviously, but what happened the first time that you were at his home? What did he do? Did he try to make it like comfortable or cool, or like what did he say that he wanted to take you there for, and what happened?
So like what he did was he drove me to Hidden Hills. And he drove a long ways, and of course he was talking about all the people that lived there and like things like that. And I was just looking out the window kind of like I've never fucking been here. It was almost like a I don't want to say like a forest, but like it was like almost like its own little village. Like there was so many houses, but there was also greenery and like more road to go around to the where these houses are. And so he brought me to this really elegant house and everything. But what I remember, there was like the regular front door, and I think there was a side door that was still at the front of the house. But either way, he took me through the front, but he had it blocked off. Like there was not any wall there, but he had it blocked off so that I don't know why, but he had a lot of this thing blocked off that could have been maybe a living room, but I'm not sure. So the first time I went to his house, he pushed me in first, told me to go in first, and he followed me up. So we went through this weird, like, like the front door thing with the weird fucked up wall thing, and I could hear people talking, like a couple of people, and it was daytime, and I was like, oh, this is no big deal. Like It's not like anything bad would happen, right? And so he follows me and tells me to go up these stairs, and it leads to like a bedroom. And it's a very like plain bedroom and everything. And he starts like talking to me, and he starts taking out his computer and showing me like his music and stuff like that, and just telling me about his aspirations and things like that. Like he told me about Revolution 9, that was his band. He was in a kind of a duo band with somebody named Jason. And he also told me he wanted to create a record label. Um he wanted to create a record label called Scarab Records. And I think he wanted to make a studio and all that. But a lot of what he said is not like I fucking understood. Like I was just kind of listening, like, oh, like he's really like whatever, he does a lot of stuff. Does he have, like I didn't know what I thought of that necessarily. And he was just showing me kind of like, that what kind of person he was personally or something. Like I think he was trying to appeal to me like this is who I am and stuff. But then pretty soon he like put the computer away, and then that's when he started having me do sexual acts on him. That first night, he just had me do oral sex on him, and he forced my head onto his penis and, did all that stuff. He ejaculated in my mouth and he told me to swallow it. He gave me a drink to swallow it with. I think it was water, but I don't know where he got that fuck. And I swallowed the water with the, cum in my mouth, and like he was telling me to. And then I don't remember what happened from there. I just remember that he dropped me back off at my friend's house, and I kind of didn't really know what to think. I didn't really know what to think then. I really wasn't thinking, I was just a kid. And from then on, from that week on, relentless text messages, relentless AIM messages, relentless like, oh, I want you to come over again. You're really nice, just saying all this stuff like about how nice I am, and about how like I don't remember if he was saying like he liked me or something, but he was just giving me a lot of attention, and at the same time being really relentless about coming over again. So I didn't really have the self-esteem to kind of stand up for myself in any way. So I didn't know what was going on, but I obliged eventually, and I was like, okay, like we can hang out again, I guess. So the same thing happened. He took me, excuse me, my mom dropped me off at my friend's house.
And this was
Crazy.
a week later about?
I think it was about a week later. But like I said, like I don't really know, and from the court documents I have, like the ones I haven't read, like I still don't know.
Right.
But anyway, um crazy shit, like I went to my friend's house and I couldn't get in through the gate. And my mom started getting really suspicious. She was like, what's going on here? And I was like, don't worry, like he'll come out, or whatever. And my friend wasn't answering his phone or anything. He couldn't let me in the gate or whatever because he wasn't answering his phone or wherever he was. And I got lucky or something, potentially. And somebody got through the gate, like the large gate, and I just followed them in through. And my mom was just kind of like, whatever. Like I think she was a little suspicious about it, but not to the extent that she would think something bad was happening. Like she had no idea. And so of course Kevin knew that this was happening. And then once I came out and came to his car, he was like, oh, that was like crazy or whatever. And like, and then I was like, okay, whatever. And I just let him take me, and we went to the next location. And from there, he took me to the Commons in Calabasas. There are a lot of people know what that is, like that are from LA or like from this area or whatever. And we went into the Barnes and Noble there, which is interesting because all of these stores I went to are still open today. You could still go visit them and be like, wow, this is where she was getting groomed, you know? So we were looking at all the books, but instead of like the last time, like him saying he could buy all this stuff for me, he was being more emotionally connected to me. Like when we were at this library, I think he asked me a lot more questions about what I went through in life. And I felt like, oh my God, like a friend was finally like listening to me about what I went through, you know? And then later on, we went to his house. It was still daytime. Same house, same thing, drove through Hidden Hills and everything. And we go through the same door. And this time, like it's darker in the house, and I don't hear any voices or anything. And he does the same thing, follows me up the stairs, tells me where to go. Same bedroom. And then from there, it was just like all out. Like we didn't talk or anything. He just started forcing me to do what he wanted me to do. So a lot of my memory is choppy from them, but I do remember him like taking off the bottom half of my clothes and taking off my shoes and stuff. And then taking off my underwear and then I remember I think he did stuff to me then too, but I still don't really remember what he did. But I think he maybe like bent me over the bed and tried to put his face inside of where like my vaginal area was and stuff. And then he picked me up from there and then put me on the bed. And then he started trying to like have sex with me. He started trying to put his penis inside me, and I knew from there I was like, oh my God, like I from what I know of sex, like I don't want to do this. I still had a very Christian mindset. Like I was just like, oh my God, like I'm not ready to like lose my virginity or anything like that. So I tried pushing him away because he was on top of me like from the back. And then I rolled over and was back on my back, and he rolled me back over and like forced me from the forcing me with his hands on my back here to like bend over almost in a doggy position, but I was still like laying on the bed. I wasn't exactly in doggy style. I was just being forced by my back and him holding my hips. And he put himself in my asshole and he started raping me anally. And I don't know the time frame of how long that happened. All I do remember is we went from daylight to nighttime to the sun going down until this ended. And I remember like rolling over on my back, and he just immediately started putting on his clothes, I was pretty sure. But I wasn't paying attention to that much. I was just like, what the fuck happened to me? Like, what happened? And immediately my next thought was just to be worrying about going home, because I figured my mom was wondering where I was, because I didn't say I was going to stay out that late. It was just around nighttime, probably like 8 p.m. or so, but it was still like nighttime. And so I hurried and started putting on my clothes, and I was more worried about like getting picked up by my mom because I was afraid like I was out too late. And so I put my clothes back on, even though like just especially during while that was happening, I did say no. I was crying, hysterically, like all that stuff happened. And eventually I just kind of froze, I think, and I was just crying while it was happening.
Almost
But
like
then,
probably like dissociate to some degree, if you can't do anything about it, it's like just like leave your body a little bit.
yeah, yeah, I would definitely say that. And then I just called my mom, and I was like, oh, pick me up at the Topanga Mall. Sorry, I forgot to text you or whatever. And so I told him to go drop me off at the Topanga Mall. And he was like, oh, well, I need to stop somewhere first and pick someone up. And I was like, okay, like just please, like I need to go home. Like I don't want to get in trouble. And so we drive near Topanga, near where the Topanga Mall is. And there's some really nice, like, looking apartments and stuff. And I see a young girl, like, standing at the entrance. And she comes over to the car and he says, "Oh, like, get out of the seat." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, get in the back seat is what I mean." And I was like, "Okay." And so I switched seats with this girl. She didn't say anything to me when I got out of the car and when she got in the car. And then I was in the back seat and she was in the front seat, and I could tell, like, we must have been the same age or so. Like, she couldn't have been much older than me, you know? She was clearly not an adult. And like, looking back on it, obviously I wasn't thinking about this type of stuff while it was happening because I was just a kid. But as I look back on all this stuff, like, I think there was certain things I was supposed to remember, you know? And so he picked up this girl at an apartment complex, and he started driving to the mall, and he dropped me off, and then he drove off. And I finally met with my mom, and I was, really happy to see her. But I think she was a little peeved I was out late or whatever. And then I don't really remember how I coped with it that night or anything. But I do remember, like, I didn't change my clothes, I didn't take a shower. I was just kind of frozen in time. I kept the same underwear on. I still had coming out of me, like, because he had ejaculated inside of me. And like, I had just worn the same clothes like the next day, even with all this going on and with it like hurting still. And I didn't tell anybody. And then I'm pretty sure I changed my clothes, but a lot of stuff I don't remember after that. Like, I think I just tried to put it away in my brain and just act like nothing happened, you know?
Absolutely. During this time, did you have anybody that you told? Did you have any friends, or it was literally just forgotten, put it away, don't ever speak of it?
So one of the things that happened was eventually I had a couple of girlfriends. Like, we all listened to the same music. We from the same high school, and we would go to shows together. We would hang out at my friend's house, and we would just all be together a lot of the time. And then one day I just kind of like said it. I told my two girlfriends. I'm pretty sure the third friend I had was there, but I can't remember. But I remember these two specific girlfriends I had that I told when we were hanging out at one of their houses. And I was just like, "Yeah, you guys know Kevin Ahern, right?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, he like did stuff to me, like, he's not, I don't know, he did, I think he like did stuff, like he raped me and stuff. That was kind of the first time I kind of thought about it, but I was like, what if, I was still thinking in the mind of like, well, whatever, like, children can't consent, but I wasn't thinking of that then. I only thought of that as an adult. As a kid, I just thought, oh, it doesn't matter. You can just have sex, like, not doing anything and stuff. Of course, after I took a health class, like, a lot of things became apparent to me. But during that day while I was at my friend's house, I told them, I was like, well, he like did a lot of bad shit to me. And they were like, oh, like, I told them it was sexual. And they were like, oh, we thought he was gay. And they just didn't say anything after that. They just moved on to the next subject. Like, they weren't emotionally like reactive to it. They were just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, it was very like, that's from what I remember of it, because after I spoke on that day, like, nobody ever brought it up again, like, ever. Like, neither did I. But they just specifically didn't bring it up at any time too. That I think they just kind of forgot about it, just tried to forget about it too or something. I don't know. But I told them then, and after that, I was like, I don't think that, I didn't feel good about telling people anymore. I think I was just like, obviously from my friend's reaction, I was like, nothing that bad happened to me, right? So whatever, I'll just go on with life. And then when I was 16, about when I was 16, I started talking to this guy. I had high school friends, and one of my high school friends, one of my guy friends, made like some kind of post, and I saw this guy comment under it, and I thought he was really cute. So I talked to my friend. I was like, dude, do you know that guy? Like he's really cute. Like hook me up, you know? And he was like, oh yeah, I know him or whatever. And so my high school friend set us up, but that guy was 21 and I was 16. So looking back on it, I'm like, I would, as a parent, I would never allow that. But once me and that guy met, like I just like my uh like teenage brain like was obsessed with him and fell in love with him, as far as what I knew to be love. And eventually I was okay with like, okay, this is a guy I'm okay with having sex with for the first time, and after that I had obviously had a lot of education and knew more about things, and we had sex for the first time, and we used a condom and everything. And it was fine. Like everything was fine from there because it was both of our first time supposedly. I don't know if he was telling the truth about that, but apparently it was both our first times. And we were very like not experienced with it, and we just kind of had fun and we're laughing really. And then we just did it. And but I call him my boyfriend. I'll call him my boyfriend for this time being, but I don't know what else we should call him. So my boyfriend, the second time he wanted to have sex with me, he was like, oh, like I think he wanted to try something that he had seen in porn, and he wanted to tie my hands behind my back. And so I was like, okay, let's try it. And as soon as we fucking started, like I went straight back to my rape because my hands were behind my back. I was not he had no education about BDSM or any of those types of things. He just straight up took a belt and tied my hands behind my back and tried to do it. Eventually he realized that I was not okay, like I was like frozen. So he stopped everything and he was like, what happened? Like, is everything okay? And from there, I just kind of blurted this type of shit out to him. I told him everything that happened to me, and I was crying in his arms, just telling him. And from there, like we were even more emotionally connected because I mean, he he was never raped, but he had a mother who was addicted to meth, and his brother's father had been in jail and had gotten out of jail when they were with each other, and they would openly have sex and he would witness it and stuff. And when I look at that, I'm like, holy shit, like these parents are so fucking fucked up, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so I think we kind of connected a little bit, even though he wasn't necessarily raped. He had witnessed all types of shit, and he had witnessed abuse of his mother, physical abuse from that guy. And he would watch her get beat the fuck up because he was too small to do anything. And I think eventually that guy left, but I don't really know too much about the history of that on my boyfriend. But I think we really connected because we both went through shit. And as we went on with dating and stuff, he was like, let's look him up on the computer. Like what if there's information about him, we should try and find out about him. And we started Googling him. And oh my fucking God, first of all, we found appeals documents from his first case because I was raped in January 2011. But the first victim of his that went to court, obviously I don't know if she was the very first victim ever, but we'll say first victim in reality from the court. So in these appeals document, it was Kevin trying to appeal what he was sentenced with. as in like 4 sexual counts and stuff from this girl that was, I think, 13 or 14. And we read the whole appeals document, and it was crazy because he was trying to like take down this girl and say like she's lying and everything, like look at what she posts on Facebook, like she's crazy, and all this stuff. And the judge specifically wrote out in these appeals documents, like, fuck you, I am not appealing this. You have the evidence you're presenting has absolutely nothing to do with this person, because you cannot do that. You cannot insult somebody's character like that, or assume somebody's character based on these things. You have, evidence A, B, C, D. We cannot get that presented to us. And the judge was really like, fuck you. It was a very written out statement. And I was kind of like, wow, like that was the only thing I saw of his first case at the time. And I didn't know the victim. They had the only names they were public with in that document was like probably the people on the defense, I think, Kevin, and that was it. Like they obscured the victim's name. They only gave initials or something. So we saw that, and then we saw he was on Megan's Law. We saw he was on Megan's Law. And then we saw other weird stuff. Like there was stuff on Yahoo Answers about Kevin, like, hey, like whatever happened to Kevin Ahern. And it's like, and then there were people commented and they were like, oh, like we don't know, blah, blah, blah. And I think another person even commented like, oh, he got arrested and blah, blah, blah. And, and there were memes made about him back then. Like it was so fucking weird. And we saw that, and obviously I saw that and I was kind of like, wow, what the fuck? And by then I was kind of starting to process that I was actually raped, and what happened to me was rape. And I took that information and I was like, please, I just want to keep it a secret. I don't want to tell anyone, to my boyfriend. And my boyfriend said, okay, like I'll respect that you don't want to tell anyone. And then after I got out of high school, and I was around 18, that's when the mental breakdown thing happened.
Okay, I want to get into that. First, after that second time at his house, what happened? Did he continue to contact you? How did you sort of get out of that? Because obviously, like you said, you were so young, like you didn't have the tools of understanding like boundaries and or even what rape was or consent. How did you sort of navigate that or get away from that situation after that? And what happened with Kevin?
So like in my head, I don't remember how that process happened, but from court documents and from text messages, I do know that he would still relentlessly text me. And then I started kind of like not answering him. I think I started getting too scared to answer him. And then eventually I would just say like, oh, I'm studying for finals. But fuck no, I wasn't studying for finals. My grades sucked. I was starting to lie to him like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't see you again. Like, because that was like the only tool I had, I think, was lying, like, so I started lying to him. And then eventually he got picked up for that first case. So then he stopped contacting me. And I think that was a very short period of time, because I remember that girl was raped just maybe a month or two after I was in January. So because her parent found this out, and she went straight to the police, and that was very good. Oh,
Sorry, I'm muted.
yeah.
It seems like before all of this happened, you had obviously you were saying like a loving childhood with your parents and there wasn't like you seemed like aside from having these things in school like bullying and stuff like that, which obviously is extremely traumatic. You were sort of just you had all your memories and you were just kind of like going through life. How did this affect you after that happened? Did you have grades that dropped? Did you have personality changes? Did you become, like, introverted at all? Like, how did that affect you at such a young age that you can remember?
Um, like, for most of it, I think I tried to hide it with pursuing art and photography and stuff, because when I was 16 and, like, 15 and going up from there, I started taking pictures of local bands, and then I branched out and just got on a random magazine online, and I was able to, start, like, kinda working for them even though I was a kid, like, wasn't exactly work. And they would just like give me free tickets and free passes to these events, and I would get to go. I would photograph, and then I would write the articles for them. So yes, I helped with the magazine, but so I did all this stuff. I photographed all these bands, all these live music events. I started interviewing musicians. I started working my way up in that magazine kind of, and I was writing music reviews. I was getting access to early releases of music and stuff so that I could review them and things like that. And started interviewing different people that were in the music industry and stuff. And so I hit a lot of that with my like accomplishments and stuff. I tried to focus on that. And then the other part of it, like emotionally, I was very angry and snappy at my parents. I remember like I was not handling it well on the inside, but I didn't know it, you know. I think that fueled a lot of like teenage angst and stuff. And I hit it with anger and stuff. But then, like I said, I had bad grades all throughout. And once I hit my senior year, I was like, oh shit, like my grades are so low, like I'm probably not even gonna graduate, you know?
Were your grades low before this, or did that happen sort of after all of this?
I think I started kind of developing kind of depression when I started getting bullied in middle school and stuff. So around middle school and a little before that, I think that's when my grades started really going down, you know?
Yeah.
And what was I gonna say? Yeah, once I hit my senior year, I think my school told me like, you have to go to alternative school to like pass your grades and pass high school, like you're not going to graduate. And so I went to this alternative school that was attached to my high school. And honestly, it was a blessing in disguise because the way the American educational system handles things is like they put 40 kids in a classroom and expect them to learn something. And it's like, how's that possible? Like you need to have smaller classes, you need to have different teachers, like we need to start working on this type of shit. Nobody can even learn anyway, but I was also distracted by like my emotions and stuff and just didn't care about my grades. But once I hit senior year and I was in my alternative school, that was another outlet that I switched to avoid the rape stuff, is that like I worked on my grades. I worked on things as fast as possible as I can, to graduate that first year. I was probably doing about 2 years worth of high school or 2.5 years of worth of high school in like 1 year or something, like because I had that bad of grades. I passed a lot of things with D's and F's that I had to redo, so I did it like day and night, I just focused on that. I remember being so stressed that I would get tension headaches, and I started going to the doctor like, what can I do about these tension headaches, like, or something, or what kind of headaches are they? And they told me tension headaches, and they were like, and I was like, okay, what can I do about it? Like, they really hurt, and I have to go lay down when I have these bad headaches. And they were like, oh, there's like nothing we can do. Here's like uh what's it called? Like not over the counter
Like
you know,
Excedrin migraine or something, like, "Here you go,
yeah, yeah,
prescription
it was
migraine."
yeah, it was like just prescription higher ibuprofen or whatever. None of
Gotcha.
that shit fucking works, so I just went through my high school grades. Luckily, I had that 21-year-old boyfriend that was helping me. So I obviously, okay, 21, who would have been like 23, 24 around that time, I guess. So he was helping me with school because he was a very smart person and he was very smart at the things that I wasn't smart at. So he helped me with my math when I had to redo algebra. He helped me with like anything like math related and like chemistry too and stuff like that. And like I just worked as hard as I could to finish school on time. And I did, but I didn't walk or anything. I was going through too much, you know. I was like, okay, what's the next thing, you know? So after I get my high school diploma from the offices or whatever, like I was just like, okay, I should do something else, you know? And so I start going to community college for photography. I'm still working with the magazine and I'm still doing local shows. What else? Oh, and then I got my first job or whatever, and it was a photography studio job. And I was doing all this at like the same time. And like it was, I think what happened was once I was 18 and had my own job and everything and was doing all this at the same time, I got like stress induced psychosis. Like I had a mental breakdown and I was like, oh my God, like my brain stopped functioning. Like, and I was in psychosis and I couldn't do any of that anymore.
Oh my gosh, so what was that like, and where were you whenever it happened? Did it just sort of come on, or was it a gradual thing that you started noticing, like, instability, or did it just hit you?
So like while I was doing all that in my life, I think a certain event triggered it because um something started happening with my dad health-wise, and then he just was really not okay physically and he had to go to the hospital. It was bad to the point where in my mind like I thought he was gonna like die or something, you know? And so I think in my head something like clicked because I was like, I'm gonna live my life and nobody around me is gonna know that I was raped, you know? And I think as I saw my dad like having such trouble physically in the hospital, I was like, I started, that's right then was when I started getting like symptoms. And so it started off, I started having delusions that my mom was trying to kill my dad or that my mom was trying to kill me and my dad or whatever. Like I had these really strong delusions. Like I fully believed that my mom was bad or something. And I was so scared. And there was one time we were at the hospital that I just kind of started freaking out too. Like I was like, oh my God, like my mom's gonna kill my dad or whatever. And I started like being really distant distance from her at the hospital. And I was like scared and I was like really like reactionary to her. And like eventually like I kept talking to her about stuff. I was like, did you do this? Like, did you do that? Like, why did you really adopt me? Like, you know, anything that I could think of in my brain, and I was in delusion that I could not trust my mom with. Like, my brain was just firing with things that were like, oh my God, like, your mom's trying to kill you. Like, you can't go home and stuff. So I was crying and everything. Like I started recording my mom, like as if like she would say something to incriminate herself or something, like just weird ass shit.
Oh.
And she eventually like got me home. And I tried to go to sleep and everything. But then right at night, like at nighttime, I just fell and like had a seizure. Like it was just really odd. Like to this day, I don't really know if the seizures I had had were real seizures or if they were like pseudo seizures. And people who don't know what pseudo seizures are, it's kind of like almost as if your body's faking it. Like you don't know that you're faking it, but like your body is acting like you're having a seizure or your body is acting like you have this symptom or that symptom that's physical but is not really like there or whatever. Your brain can do incredible things that people don't really realize. And so I collapsed and had a seizure and I was like fucking like shaking and I was just like screaming and talking out loud and I was just like saying weird shit and everything. And my boyfriend at the time, another thing that I was going through was my boyfriend had talked to my parents and was saying all this shit, like how his mom was gonna do more bad stuff to him, and try and convince my parents to let him move in my house when I was 18. Another bad idea. But so luckily he knew like something was really wrong, and so he called an ambulance and everything. An ambulance came and they took me, and they just treated me like I was on drugs. They were just like, oh, what did she have in her mashed potatoes? Like, must have been a really, like, fuck, like, whatever, she on, and all this stuff, just saying things that I could remember, that just they were making fun of me, and like just thinking that I was on drugs, and like going back and forth on what it could be. And I remember I looked straight into the eyes of this one EMT, and I like couldn't even breathe because I was so like I was having such a odd reaction. And he looked me in the eyes, and I think he could kind of tell like something was wrong with me. And like he was like, you gotta like breathe, like come on, like kind of stay with us type of thing. It was like weird. And like almost like he was the only one that was like, maybe she's not okay. And so I went to the hospital. I went to West Hills Hospital, and just weird shit started happening from there. I just was screaming. I thought that another delusion I was having was when I got to the hospital from the ambulance, I thought I was dying. Like I just straight up thought I was dying. I thought I was about to die. I thought I was about to just not be alive anymore. Like I didn't know what happened to me. I was like, what the fuck happened to me? Am I having a stroke? Like am I having a heart attack or something? And I was just laying there like not knowing if I could like move, and just feeling like I was dying or something. And I just kept having more delusions and everything, and I just started saying out loud that I was raped by Kevin Ahern and all this stuff. And I was just saying such odd shit, and I was doing such odd things that like they were like, she's mentally not okay. So they called in somebody to evaluate me for a 5150. And because I was talking to my mom and I had gestured to cutting my wrist, they were like, oh my God, she has to be 5150, oh my God. And it was like, okay, Jesus Christ, not that I thought about that at the time, but I was just fucking crazy. And so the evaluator came, and I just couldn't even talk to her. I was just screaming still, and I was like, Kevin Ahern raped me. Like, don't you guys understand? And she didn't do anything about it. She didn't like she didn't I don't think she really believed that. I think she just thought I was on drugs or something. So they then okayed me for a 5150, and I had to go on a hold. And they took me to Del Amo Hospital, which that was the first hospital I went to, and oh my God, it was one of the most traumatic experiences that I've ever had. And I went to this hospital through ambulance to be 5150'd, and this hospital was very like I don't know if it was being funded through public funding or something, but it was a very low grade like hospital, looking back on how many times I've been 5150'd. And I was sitting in this room, and then somebody came eventually, and I was just kept having delusions. I was like, what if they're taking me to this place to experiment on me or whatever or something. Just anything that I was thinking of, I was like, I believed. And eventually they told me where my room was and everything, and like I think they told me like, think you need to go to bed or whatever. I can't remember. Yeah, it was in the morning. It was like very early in the morning at 3 to 4 a.m. that I got there. And then I think by the time that weird stuff was happening, it was in the AM, because I don't think I slept. So from the time I got there, I just started doing crazy shit. I was like, oh my God, like I need to get out of here. I was trying to find ways to get out. I was trying to like, like I didn't know what to do. Like, and then I started thinking these people were like not like they were I didn't know what they were. I just thought these people, that these other patients were bad people or something and trying to keep me in here or something. So another thing I did was I started like going around looking at all these people. And then to this day, I don't know if it was a hallucination or if it was real, but I lean towards real, and I'll get to that later. But I saw a man that I thought was Kevin Ahern in this 5150 hold. And then I started freaking out from there. It was all hell broke loose. I was just like, oh my God, like, I was just screaming and just like I tried to take this one girl down. And of course she was way stronger than me. And she was like, what the fuck, and like and then eventually the people in the hold, the nurses and everything, realized that I was like freaking out finally. And two really big nurses or workers or whatever, they took me by the arms and they lifted me up and they took me to a random like bedroom setup, like bedroom that other people was sleeping in, and they forced me on the bed. And all throughout this thing, I'm just saying like, I just said like what, you know and they get a fucking a syringe, and they fucking stab me in the ass. They pull my pants down and they stab me in the ass. And to this day, I don't know what was in that injection. A lot of people get injections of Haldol in 5150s, but this was really weird because as soon as they gave me that, they left the room, and I was like, my heart rate had slowed down so much that I was just kind of laying there like kind of just like couldn't move. Like I was just like, holy shit, like my heart rate was getting low, and like I was just my body was almost being forced to relax or something. And then I started having more delusions and everything, and I got back up after maybe 15-20 minutes, and another nurse had come and was doing her rounds and checked on me, and my ass hurt so bad I was just like limping through the room, and then got through the hallway. And like I was so scared, I just tried to break a fucking fire alarm. And then from there I blacked out. Like from there I don't remember what happened. I think I passed out or something. And then the next thing I woke up like some kind of morning, some kind of next day morning or something. And I had a fall risk bracelet on. And I was like, what the fuck? I didn't remember what happened after that. So I don't know how I got the fall risk bracelet. Usually they give that to old people that have falling a lot, you know? So I woke up from that. And, what's weird about my psychosis is that I wasn't always like full blown in psychosis. Sometimes my symptoms would be really bad, and then sometimes they would be kind of lesser, and it would be more of like a manic state and more of like a high energy type of like delusions and stuff, where it wasn't negative. It was more like, oh my God, like this and this probably happened to you and stuff like that. And I started, kind of like just doing what I was told during the 5150, to take the meds, to eat your amount of breakfast, amount of lunch, you need to eat and shit. And I was just kind of manic at that point. I wasn't having the full-blown psychosis symptoms, but I was kind of like manic. And so eventually they thought I was okay, like after a week or something or so. And I had been there long enough that I was like, I don't know what's fucking happening in the world. Like I was there for like a week or two or something. So I have no idea what happened during those 2 weeks as far as like news and stuff. So eventually they released me thinking that I was fine. They put the diagnosis as brief psychotic disorder, and I was assigned a psychiatrist and a therapist. So I was released from the hospital, and I was just so like out of it. Like I had been in such a weird, quiet place for so long that like when we went out to go eat after that, before the drive home, the noise was like way too much for me. Like I couldn't, like, the noise was too loud with everybody talking and shit. Like I thought it was way too loud, and it like bothered me and like gave me anxiety and shit. But eventually I went home, and I kept having psychosis symptoms for still a couple more months, both on and off. And after about 6 months, I was kind of okay for a period of time. But then it started again like in 2017 and early 2018. And that's when I had my second psychosis. I've only had 2 times that I've been in psychosis. And I've been diagnosed with a multitude of things, but ultimately, I just have a history of psychosis. And right now, like we said at the beginning, I haven't had psychosis since 2018. So I went through all that, like the first psychosis, like I told you, and that was around 2015, 2016. And then a while in 2017, I was a little bit okay. And then it started up again, probably mid 2017 or late 2017. And I started having delusions again. But this time, I believe that the psychosis was induced from drugs, because at the time I was doing a lot of coke. I One of my friends that I had in high school, I had met up with again, and I they were selling coke, so I started kind of, hanging around him, and just, you know, for a while I was doing coke, and I would go with him on his runs, and he would sell, and I would be in the back seat like just watching everybody, and continuing doing coke with him all night because he was the type to get high on his own supply. And like then I think this doing too much coke, I was doing so much coke that I think it induced another psychosis, especially because that second psychosis in 2017 and 2018 like was more like drug based. Like it was more like, oh my God, the helicopters are trying to get me, and oh my God, my house is bugged. Like you can't like look out the window, like that car out there is not a real car, like stuff like that. And I still had a lot of I just had so many delusions. There were a lot of delusions that were religious based, from probably from my background being a Christian. And there was so much stuff that I hallucinated that I definitely would like go into detail in my book too. And it's just like I could talk about the psychosis part for days, because it's just like there's so much stuff that I remember from it. Whereas a lot of people, when they're manic or whatever, sometimes they don't even remember what they did. But I remember exactly the delusions I had, the hallucinations I had, and the what I did and what I thought at the time. So it's crazy, you know.
Oh my gosh. So what was that time like? Did you have to be admitted again? Did this happen at home? What was the situation like the second time?
So throughout the years between 2015 and early 2018, I was hospitalized like so many times, because not only did I have psychosis half the time, but then sometimes I was going through a really thorough depression, because right after I had that mental breakdown, I took the time to report it to the police once I was like okay enough.
And how old were
And
you whenever you reported it?
I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah. So from there,
And did your parents know then after that, whenever you were talking about the hospital, did they end up okay?
yeah, they knew and found out. First, my mom found out. I think my boyfriend told her once I was having that freak out in the hospital the first time. And because I was saying all that stuff out loud, and he told her, like, yeah, that's legit. She was, she told me way back when. And so my mom and him knew, but my dad was still in the hospital because he was severely physically like not okay. And so he was in the hospital for a while. So my mom didn't tell him until a little while after he was home and after he was better. So after that they then knew, and my mom came with me when I reported it. So yeah, like they definitely knew.
Very supportive too. It sounds like you had a very supportive circle once the people closest to you found out. How did they react to that whenever they knew?
you know, like every hold on. I think that the people closest to you, when they find out you're raped, like they have their own emotional reaction as well. So like I think my dad, like I think he kind of hid his anger a lot, and like he didn't bring it up unless I brought it up, but I didn't really talk to him that much about it because I was so like I had only just started talking about it to law enforcement. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not ready to tell you guys the details, you know?" And so my dad knew, and my mom, like one time when the investigators came to my house to question me for some time, I was like, I wanted my mom to leave the room because I was so uncomfortable with that, with my parents hearing the details of the rape. I was so like embarrassed by it and ashamed by it, I think, that I just didn't want them to hear the details. And I also didn't want to be like affected by them being in the room with what I was going to say. So I had my mom leave the room like each time. And one time she left the room and they finished talking to me and I came back in the kitchen and she was crying and she was like, "I am a horrible mom." And I was just like, "No, you're fucking not." Like, like, do you know how many kids are raped like a year? Like, do you know how many people this happens to? Like, so she had her own emotional reaction, and I was still mentally ill, so we were still reacting to that too. I mean, so much was going on.
100%. Yeah. And I can only imagine how, because your mother was the one that dropped you off, and she had to have been just feeling so guilty because I'm sure that, she seems like a very protective parent and somebody who tried to do her best with you. And unfortunately, a lot of parents, they don't talk to kids about this stuff. And so that can also be really hard to realize and be like, gosh, why didn't I ever talk to my child about this? But again, it's like parents aren't taught just like how we weren't growing up. Like they're not taught all this stuff either to know to talk to you. So I think that that's amazing though that they had that reaction and didn't turn against you because that happens too a lot. Loved ones can turn away because of those reactions and not be supportive. So I love that she sort of had that come to moment and took responsibility for what she needed to in order to be there for you, because even though it wasn't her fault, right? Like she couldn't there was only so much she could really do and with her I don't wanna say limited perspective, but, that's
With
why,
her
like
knowledge, yeah.
yeah, I'm sure that was the last thing she was thinking dropping you off at your friend's house that, you could be taking off with a predator, but it's also really nice to it was probably reassuring for you to just know that she cared, and that she wasn't turning her back on you, that she believed you, and that she took some sort of responsibility, even if it wasn't all hers to carry, but at the same token, it wasn't yours to carry either, and I know that that can be really tricky trying to process something that you went through as a young child, not necessarily like infant age, but 14, 15, like that's still very young. Like I didn't there's no way I could have processed all that at your age, going through all of that. Nobody could. You're still so young. So all this is happening. You're going through psychosis. Your parents are finding out what's going on with the investigation. What are you being told whenever you're reporting this? You had already known about a former victim. So did that get talked about at all? And how was that going on the back end?
Like during the investigation and stuff.
Yeah, whenever
Yeah,
you first started to report to authorities, I should say.
yeah. So when I first was being questioned, they questioned me about that first victim. They were like, "Do you know so and so?" And I was like, "No, I'm not familiar with that name." And I think that I don't know if they showed me a picture of her and asked or what, but I remember I was like, "I don't know this person." And that was it from there. They were like they when my investigator asked me that, he was straight up like, "Don't look her up." Like, no. Like, and I was like, "Okay, like not that I was going to, motherfucker, but whatever." And she had such a complicated name that I didn't even remember her name after that either. So I was like, "Okay, like, I know she was a victim. I mean, there's not many details I could find anymore about that on the internet." So that's all I knew. And I could tell that throughout the investigation that, they didn't want me, knowing certain things or whatever, because they were investigating, they were like, it didn't get picked up with the DA until a little later because they had that investigation. And, it's just crazy.
Wow. And so how did you end up going to trial right away? Was Kevin informed that you were that there was an investigation? How did this sort of start progressing after the report to authorities?
So
And when
from
did you
what
go
I,
to court?
yeah, yeah. So from what I know of, that I've read in the court documents and stuff, it was almost like a back-to-back thing. Like Kevin had his first case, and I think that was in 2014, and he served some time. But then, or 2014, or like, no, let me think. Yeah, like I said, the other victim was raped in 2011. And so that case started from there because it got reported by her parents and shit. And that investigation happened, and then he was tried and he was found guilty and stuff. So by the time I think he got out, by the time it was 2015, I'm not sure when he got out or how much time he served for that first case. But I know that immediately when I reported the crime that he did to me, he was arrested and he was, arraigned, and he was let out on bail. And and that happened right in 2015, around the time that that I obviously reported it and stuff. So he was arrested, but obviously let out on bail. And so from there, I didn't really, a lot of the court dates, I'm told like you don't have to go to, because there are a lot of continuances and a lot of like, everybody comes together and they just agree, like, let's continue this to this date, and then they leave. Like, so once my case was picked up by the DA, like, I wasn't really given a lot of information anyway. So the next thing that was court related that I had to do was I had to go to my preliminary hearing. So there was an investigation, and I'm sure they were still investigating while the DA took the case and everything, because they still kept finding shit. And then like I said, the DA picked it up. And then the next court date was my preliminary hearing, or Kevin's preliminary hearing. And the way I could describe that is almost like a mini trial. Like, I'm pretty sure the preliminary hearing is there to determine if it goes on to trial, or if the case is dismissed or whatever. I think that's kind of what they do, because they told me I needed to appear at the preliminary hearing. And I took the stand. I was sworn in and I was questioned on the stand. And then and Kevin was there as well. I had to identify him in the courtroom. And I wasn't really told much information about the preliminary hearing. The only thing that happened is, as soon as I got off the stand, the investigator and somebody else or whatever, like, told me, like, let's go into this room. And if anybody knows about Van Nuys Court, like, there's the levels of these courtrooms. Like, right when you get outside the courtroom, sometimes there's another room on the side, and it almost looks like an interrogation room. So I was in this room and I was approached by the investigator, and he laid down some pictures, and it was faked, photoshopped Facebook posts or Facebook conversation between me and the former victim, that in one conversation, very short conversation, that conveniently absolved him of both of his crimes. It was as if we were talking and colluding together to just get him in trouble. Like, she was saying like, oh, just lie like I did, and stuff like that. And it was fucking nuts. And they were like, yeah, like, do you know anything about this? And I was like, no, because I had never talked to her in my entire life. I didn't even remember her name. And so I was just taken back from that, like from the preliminary hearing. And then 2 days I took out my dad's painkillers and stuff, and I took my mom's Xanax, and I bendered out for 2 days. And then that second day I overdosed and was hospitalized again. So that all that court stuff was affecting me really badly. But luckily I didn't have to go to a lot of court dates. Then later, so I think that preliminary hearing happened either 2016 or 2017. And we had trial by June of 2018. And the trial, just like everything else, I mean, a lot of stuff was kept hidden away as far as my knowledge of what was going on. So during the trial, the only thing I did was I arrived on the days that I had to testify, and then I had to leave, and I just stayed home while the trial was going on, because I think it was apparent that I couldn't sit in on this trial or anything, especially before testifying, because I think the DA and everybody involved, they're afraid of you being influenced by other people's testimony and things like that. So I'm pretty sure they specifically told me, like, yeah, you can't watch in on the trial. Like, you can only come to like the subpoena dates. And then I was subpoenaed, and then I testified. And I took the stand, and I like cried the whole time. And when you when you read the transcripts, it's just like, okay, we need to give her a break. And I just and I look back on that, and I can exactly remember I'm sitting there with a microphone to my face, and I have my tears going down my face, and I'm like, no, like, keep going. Like, you guys need to see this shit that you're doing to me. And so I was, cross-examined. I was questioned a lot on the stand. Um, Luckily, sometimes I think a lot of the laws they have is like you can't really bring up someone's character and stuff. So mostly what they questioned me about was, the whole thing that happened. The defense side tried to get me to trip up on my dates or trip up on what I was saying, but I'm pretty sure I kept my story straight throughout this whole process from the very beginning to the very end. And you know, uh and another thing I had to do while I was on the stand was they had subpoenaed the text messages records of me and Kevin, because I still had that same goddamn phone number that I had in high school. They were able to get all that information. I had given them my phone number, I had given them all that information, and they got the copied text messages both from my what's it called? The company that I use, Verizon, and they also got it from like AT&T, because Kevin had AT&T or something. So I had to read off all these text messages and explain that, yes, we were having this conversation, and this was said and this was said. And it was very apparent that it was like very like damning evidence, And I glanced at the jury once, and I was like, oh shit, like I can't look at the jury. And yeah, like I was on the stand for a while, and then I was able to get down, and I think they ended testimony that day, or they went on to the next person to testify. And I had did it that first day, all I needed to do. And then I had to come in the next day just to answer a few more questions in the beginning. And one of the things the defense asked is like, were you a virgin? And it was like, no. But at the same time, the judge was like, you can't ask her that, like, you know. And but I had already answered, and it was like, fuck you, yes, I was a virgin. Like, not that it really matters, that doesn't fucking matter anyway. But so, and then the DA asked me, was there the use of a condom? Was there any protection? And I was like, no, there was no protection. He didn't take the time to do any of that. He just straight up just went. And then that was all the questions that I answered, and then I had to leave, and I went back home. And then I just waited, and then eventually the DA called me. I'm pretty sure like when everything was over, they had the verdict, they had finished the trial and everything. And she told me, we got him guilty on 7 counts. I was at home when I got this information, and I was just like, oh my fucking God, like I dropped down to the floor, but then I like realized like I was dropping to the floor. So I like, okay, I need to stand. So I just like dropped to the floor, and then I was like squatting, just like, oh my fucking God, like what just happened? And I just said thank you and I hung up. But she never told me about him absconding. So I was completely oblivious to that part after my trial and after everything. I didn't know any of that. So I think I celebrated a guilty verdict, but at the same time, I still wanted to move on with my life and forget about it. So I didn't look into sentencing dates. I didn't look into any of that. I figured they would call me if I needed to come do my victim's impact statement or wanted to. So, like, I didn't look into it for a very long time to me, and then eventually my dad died, and that was in late 2019. And from there, like, I don't know what urged me to, but after he died, like, maybe not shortly after he died, but a little bit after he died, I decided to Google Kevin again just to see what information was there, since I had last checked way back when I was a teenager. And I saw he was on Megan's Law, and it said he was in violation, and that it was like, if you know anything about this fugitive or whatever, it was like, please contact the courts or blah blah blah. And then I was like, what the fuck, like, what do you mean in violation? Like, and at the time, like, it said absconded too, and I didn't know what that word meant, so I looked up the fucking word. And then I was like, wow, like, he he straight up left, so then from there I was like, okay, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, like I need to start contacting the DAs again. So I got in contact with the DA again. She told me to contact another DA that was in Van Nuys, because the DA that handled my case moved from Van Nuys to a different location. So it was the case was given to another DA, and I asked her, what happened, and she told me that he absconded during that kind of last day of trial, and they tried to find him and they couldn't find him. So I asked her, like, so what is next from that? And she's like, there's a warrant out for his arrest. If he's ever pulled over, then it would be flagged, and I was just like, okay, like, so I started requesting more court documents and stuff, and I started gathering more information to see like what happened. And it's just very odd the way all that happened. Like, luckily, I'm glad that I didn't find that out until after my dad died, because I think that would have sent my dad into a fucking heart attack, like, so I think it was supposed to happen like that.
Oh my gosh. That is really wild to, just consider that journey because it seems like something so good happened. He was charged 7 counts. Like you don't really hear about that happening either, where like when somebody finally does go to court that there's like a guilty verdict. A lot of times it's kind of buried. But then
Mhm.
to have him abscond and just leave, and to not have, I guess, to see sort of like a seemingly drive to be concerned about that, like the fact that they weren't like actively sharing that with you and telling you, because I mean he could have like disappeared and like tried to put a hit on you or somebody else, or who knows, like that literally is a fugitive on the run and he's dangerous, and to not like put a concern on that or to like even alert you is really concerning to me, because even though they did the right thing and convicted him, it doesn't seem like they really followed it up with like he should have been like in jail or whatever the, consequences were like that day that he was on the stand. There should have been no, leeway of even giving him a moment to escape, You know what I mean? So that's really wild. And then to have to find that out, after these other really traumatic times in your life, what started happening in your life after that? Was that, uh, or I guess, like, what was the next step that you took? Did you dive further into trying to get more investigations? Did you sort of back off from it? When you found out that he left, how did that affect you? And what was that like?
So also one of the things I want to mention is like from after I started getting those like court documents and stuff and started reading through them, there was stuff that I read that was incredibly like insane. Like one of the things was like sometime during the trial, the DA did approach the judge and was like, he is a flight risk from his last case. He should not be out on bail. I want him in custody for the remainder of the trial. And the judge said no. And it was like, does nobody understand? Like, it's crazy. To me, it's like either you guys were that ignorant, like you don't know that that's dangerous, or something is happening and somebody is being paid off because how is he able to just do that, So that happened, but my next steps after that was honestly, I was just kind of re-traumatized again. I was just like, what the fuck? So 2019, and then the pandemic happened. So I was stuck with like virtual therapy appointments and just dealing with it on my own. And then I think eventually it got kind of so bad that I started having kind of more PTSD like symptoms. Like I started having a lot of anxiety at night. I would start having anxiety attacks at night. And this was after the pandemic. The pandemic like pretty much put a pause on my life because I was just, it was just crazy because that's when everything right when I found out was right before the pandemic happened. So it's almost like I was forced to kind of like keep that in too or whatever. So I didn't really, all I tried to do is try to get more information and stuff, but I wasn't able to do that until after the pandemic because so much shit was closed. And so after the pandemic, I got some more documents, I'm pretty sure. And I think that's around when I got the transcripts of the trial. I had to request that through the court reporter, and victims don't get access to this information for free. Like you have to request it on your own, and then you have to pay for it. I paid about $500 for those transcripts, and I can't afford to have those like damaged or whatever because then I would have to do it all over again. So I got those transcripts and I just started reading through them here and there, but I was still so traumatized. Like to this day, like I don't know if I've already said, but I still can't have not read all of the transcripts because it just re-traumatizes me. It's just a little too much to, like I can get by with the information that I know of, and that's that because there's pretty much nothing that I can really do. So I read through these transcripts and I find out so much shit. I end up finding out like during the trial, while I was testifying, somebody from the jury like raised his hand to be excused. And it turns out that he knew me, he knew the victim and stuff. And to this day, I don't know who that is, obviously, because I don't know who the jury is. They don't tell you that. And to this day, I don't know who that was that knew me. So an alternate juror had to come in, and things kept going on from there. Another thing that I found out was so that victim from the first trial, after all that happened in her life, her mom and her family, they moved to a Scandinavian country. That I'm pretty sure that's where she's from. And so they had been living in the Scandinavian country for ever since that happened to her, whatever. And like I read in the transcripts that she was subpoenaed to testify for my side. She had to fly all the way from that Scandinavian country back to here to testify she was asked. It's not like they forced her, I'm pretty sure. Like they were just like, will you testify? And she agreed to it. And she, when I found that out, I thought that was so fucking crazy. So I started looking into that girl finally, because I was like, the trial's over. I should be able to talk to her. This is nuts. So I found her like on Instagram or whatever, and I was like, hey, like I'm the person from this, and we were like, oh my fucking God. So we had our own conversation, and I ended up finding out that when she was told and asked to come testify, she was in the hospital, like newly diagnosed with MS. Like she was not okay, and she still decided to come and uh testify for my side. And so, I mean, when we were talking, she was like, when I got up on the stand, I was not okay. And they thought I needed a translator or something. And I was just like, oh my fucking God. Like, I couldn't believe that she came all the way from there and she had just been diagnosed with MS. So I found out that happened, and I was able to read more of the transcripts, and I found out that Kevin took the stand and he just got shredded, and it was like you're totally guilty, man. And that was probably after that he absconded and decided like I'm fucked, so he got the fuck out of there, I think. And I read the closing arguments, and I read through some of the other people that testified. Obviously, like the people on the law enforcement side had to testify. The people that were in charge of the technology, looking into the records of my phone and everything. And there was the law enforcement, the police officer that I first reported to. She testified. Obviously, I don't know what they said, but I have it in the transcripts. They all testified, and then there were people from the defense side. There was a lot of court court conversations that were held out of presence from the jury. Like there was one time that, oh my God, I completely forgot to mention this, but like right before the trial started, they subpoenaed me to come talk, and I was in the room alone in the court with the judge and my side and his side and him there. And they questioned me about the fake Facebook Photoshop pictures. And one of the things that had happened was back when I had reported him, back when I reported the crime that happened to me, I got a friend request from his mom. Like, and I just put it away in my mind. I was like, this isn't important. Like, I'm dealing with much bigger things. But when they approached me with those documents, then I remembered, like, oh shit, uh, they were probably trying to look at my profile and shit, because I remember getting this friend request, and I looked through my phone and I still had the friend request from his mother. And they took note of that, and they were like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, like, and so I was questioned on the stand about that out of presence of the jury. And they questioned, like, so did someone sent you a Facebook request? And I was like, yeah, it was his mom. And like, I couldn't help but laugh, because it was like, why the fuck were you doing this after you were arrested? Like, so just so much stuff, just so much stuff. Like, I know we're skipping around here and there, but yeah, like, another thing, I'm trying to think of the certain things I know from reading the documents and the transcripts, but a lot of stuff I still haven't read because it's that traumatizing. So and there's a lot of stuff I want to go over with a lawyer or something, because there is also a lot of legal language that I don't clearly understand. So, there was just so much stuff that I got to read and realize what was happening, and then I even had to process that. And eventually, I was told I should get a trauma therapist. And then was when I started making real progress with my mental health, because I started dealing with my PTSD like symptoms. and I started doing EMDR for that. So like in combination with learning all these things about my trial and then trying to go on with life because I felt like I couldn't do anything about it. I totally wanted to get private investigators on this shit, but I didn't have the money for that. I was only like 21 or whatever when or 23 or 24 when I was knowing all this, and I didn't have that kind of money. So yeah, just
So your healing journey had started, but I know before that you had put some things on Twitter about you're obviously in the LA area, you're around a lot of celebrities. You had some things that you were sort of whistleblowing about the Cash Money Millionaire team, about Demi Lovato, and some things related to her. I wanted to go back and cover that if you wouldn't mind, and then we can sort of move forward into you speaking out, podcasting, and where you are today.
yeah, okay. So I'm gonna start with CAS centers, and that was the rehab and dual diagnosis center that Demi Lovato co-owned for a while. So when I went to CAS centers, the reason I went to CAS centers is because like I had been 5150'd, and I was thinking to myself like, oh, like maybe I need to go to one of these like programs or whatever. And they gave me two options. They gave me CAS centers and they gave me some like Malibu thing. And I was like, what insurance is going to cover this Malibu stuff? Like, so I looked at CAS centers and I was like, oh, like, because I was familiar with CAS centers. I had been in group therapies with people that had been in CAS centers, and they said weird shit like that the people would like yell at you so that you would like get out of your thinking or whatever it is. I just remember this girl saying, "Oh yeah, they would yell at you and like they really break you down so that you could come back up," and like all this weird shit. And I was like, but she talked about it like really positively back then, back when I was doing group therapies in like 2015. But around early 2018, I had that drug-induced psychosis, and I was still kind of suffering from the symptoms a lot, actually. So I ended up going to the center because even though it was a rehab, they advertised that they helped with like dual diagnosis and stuff. So I went there, and immediately they like get us in a room and they tell us like in addition to what insurance will cover, you have to pay $6,000 a month. And I was like, oh my God. And my mom, I think reluctantly like just was like, okay, and we paid it. And so I was in this program, and the shit that I witnessed and the shit that I saw, I mean, it's probably happening in other rehabs in LA and stuff, but it's just insane what people do and what people get away with in the healthcare industry. Because like we said in the beginning, like I have experience in the healthcare industry, and I've worked at group homes and things like that. I've even worked in rehab centers or dual diagnosis centers for children. And like when I was there, I was still in full-blown psychosis. But for some reason, I don't think they knew how to handle like the mental health side of things. I think they more so tried to put on the like staying sober and doing the rehab part of things. So I was in full-blown psychosis while all this was going on, but I still remember certain things that happened and that I found out while I was there. First of all, like the staff that we had a house that we stayed in, but the staff that was in charge of us had only that was literally just got out of recovery. Some of them were less than a year sober and things like that, and they did not have credentials to be working in the healthcare field. Like all the only credentials that they really had was like you know having a bit of sobriety under their belt. I don't know if these people were certified in like what is it, like RBT or whatever, like to be certified to work in these rehabs and stuff. um so I don't know if they were credentialed with that, but judging by the knowledge they had about things and the way they treated us, like I don't think they were certified in anything at all, but I'll leave that up in the air. So, one of the things is like I also don't think that the therapists there were, um, able, like, I don't think the therapists there had the knowledge to like help us because anytime we went to our group therapy, all we did was watch TED Talks or like do exercises, like weird exercises that you would kind of see in like acting and like improv stuff. Like it was a lot of improv like exercises and stuff and a lot of just watching TED Talks and it's like I can do this at home. I don't need to pay $6,000 for this, whatever. And the main thing though was that I was still in full-blown psychosis and they would straight up just let people leave. They would let people leave the house and like do whatever they want. So in psychosis, I was being fucking delusional and crazy. And so one of the first things I did was I walked all the way from mid-city to downtown LA because I wanted to go to a show that I still had tickets to. Like I walked all the way there. In the meanwhile, like so much weird shit happening to me, like guys approaching me or whatever, like cars driving by slow, like I went through a lot of places just from there, from mid-city where the rehab was located, on and all the way to downtown LA. So, I mean, come on, they allowed us to get into so much danger. And then I did it a second time. I walked all the way to another place that was about like 20 miles away, and then I walked back. And then I was gone the whole day from the beginning of the day until curfew at 11. And that's all of a sudden when they were like, oh, that's not good. So we're gonna take away your phone privileges. You can't talk to anybody. We're gonna take away your computer. You are on lockdown. Like we're gonna take all this stuff away from you, which not necessarily like weird, but the thing is when you go to rehab or you go to these centers, they only do that for the first couple of days to like get you acclimated to the environment. And they keep your phone for those couple of days or that week, and then they give it back to you when you first start the rehab. I have never heard of people being able to go out and like do all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they get put on lockdown and they get their phones taken away and shit. So I just signed myself out and I was like, whatever. And I left and I got an Uber. And I did this like, I'm pretty sure I did this like twice or something because there was a couple of us that were like, we were there for mental health and stuff. There was me and there was another girl that had just been gang raped and was like opening a case or something. And me and her and some of the other girls, like we would leave and go and like sign ourselves out of rehab, and then we decide like to go back because we knew something wasn't right, but we were in such a vulnerable place of needing help that like it's not like we could be like what's going on, this was our options. So I left the rehab and then I came back to the rehab, and that's when I was walking more and stuff like that out of the fucking not the building but the house. And I mean they just straight up let me do it though. Like I could have gotten, I don't know, I could have gotten abducted or fucking like robbed or something, like, or whatever. Anything could have happened to me because I was just in psychosis walking around like doing whatever. And they did not have a care in the world until that night, that day. I was gone the whole day. And then they just took away all my stuff, and they were like, okay, you can't like do anything, you can't leave, you can't do anything. And from there I was like, okay, nope. And I signed myself out of rehab, which I know what kind of documents you sign when you sign out of rehab and stuff like that. Not that I've been to a lot of rehabs, but because I've worked in healthcare and I have the knowledge of having gone to trade school for a medical assistant and stuff, I do know that there are documents that people sign off to, like, because you're doing it against medical advice. But the thing was, there was so much stuff I had to sign. It was like had to be like that many pages at least, because and I was doing this online for them, and they were going to give me copies, but like I was just signing, like a lot of stuff that was just like probably that I couldn't speak about it and stuff, but I was in psychosis, so I didn't know what the fuck I was signing. They just had me sign so many fucking papers. And then I just left, and then I just got an Uber, and then I just left in the middle of the night. I was like, I can't do this, Like, so that's my experience with CAS centers. Like, I hope they're still not like that, but it was so weird to go to this type of rehab that is connected to a celebrity, because when I first arrived at the rehab, everybody was talking about how like, oh yeah, Demi Lovato got us into a free concert. Like it was so cool. And like it's like, why are we going to concerts and partying like while we're in rehab? Like that doesn't make any sense to me. Or in a dual diagnosis mental health center. Like what the fuck, Like Jesus. So that was, all the cast stuff and everything. And that just weirded me out as far as the healthcare industry. And if you dive deep and you start researching rehabs and stuff like that, like there's a lot of sketchy shit that goes on. Like I implore people to start looking into those types of like centers and stuff, like those rehabs and those homes where they say, oh, like we'll help you for a month or 3 months or whatever, and you can, they offer all this stuff, all this therapy, but then some of the time you go, I guess, and your needs are not met and stuff. So I would imagine there's a lot of places like CAS that are not following like certain protocols and stuff, but it's crazy to me. So I wanted to speak about that on Twitter because I never got to talk about that because I was just in psychosis and I was freaked out. So that was with the rehab and the CAS centers, but that was such bullshit.
And I've heard that from a lot of, people that have come on my show have had some sort of stint with whether it's like addiction or some type of detox recovery, and it seems like there's a lot of these cases happening where things aren't worked with under integrity, whether it's, MK Ultra stuff going on to where there's, sort of like a separate segment of the establishment that they're taking patients that's sort of like off books or, out to the side and they're doing, mind control. Or if it's something like in your case where it's just, total neglect and they charge a lot for this, and they tout it like you said, they put celebrities behind it and they do a lot to sort of promote these, and you have to kind of wonder about the people that go in, you hear a lot of stories too about people that like go crazy in these centers or whatever it is. And you have to wonder if it's like them or if it's like induced by, a faulty staff that's there. So I love that you're bringing attention to this because it's not talked about enough. And I think people that come out that have a story about it are usually looked at and discredited because they're like, why would I believe you? You were in a, a rehab center. Like,
Yeah.
who are you? And it's like, okay, well, for first of all, like why were they, having trouble to begin with, whether it was like an emotional thing that they're dealing with, psychosis in your case, or like an addiction, what brought them to that? Like, we have no compassion for people. And then second, like, why are we just trusting that the people working there have the best interest in mind of the patients? Like, we don't know. There should be a lot of questions asked. That's like a very vulnerable population that seeks help, or gets admitted, and we're not careful about, investigating this. So I really appreciate you shining a light on that. And I love that you took to Twitter to do it. You've been whistleblowing a lot of stuff on Twitter lately, and I'm here for it, girl. So talk about the other part of that tweet and or anything else that you want to talk about. But you had mentioned you wanted to talk about the Cash Money Millionaires, and some other things involved with I guess like LA Hollywood-ish celebrity type environments.
Yeah, so with part of the story, like there's a lot that, I have to say very carefully. So basically, when I'm not going to specify the time or date that this stuff was happening, I'm just going to tell you like, yes, it was before my trial. And I was an adult, obviously. So one of the things that started happening was I met this rapper that was on Cash Money Records, and We hooked up and everything, and we just kept it cool, and I just, I didn't really ask him anything. But before that, I was also friends with, and I was hooking up with this other guy, and he was a drug dealer, and his father he worked in Warner Brothers Entertainment. And like, I don't know how high up his father was in Warner Brothers Entertainment, but it must have been high enough that it's reasonable, because this guy I was hooking up with, the dad's son, had a very nice place to live. It wasn't Hidden Hills, but it was someplace very similar to Hidden Hills. And he had a beautiful apartment, a beautiful, like, just area he lived in and everything. And he was selling drugs. I know he was selling coke. I don't know what else he was selling, but he also said he was friends with this Cash Money rapper that I wanted to hook up with, or whatever, or that I wanted to meet. So this is before I hooked up with the rapper. And so he's like, "Oh yeah, like, we can make that happen." And I was like, whatever. I just, like, ignored that. And he, the things that I tried to confirm with this guy is, we started talking a lot about the music industry, and a lot about just the certain types of people in the industry. And I straight up asked him, I was like, does Birdman, like, rape these guys and give them a record deal? Like, does he say, like, "Oh, I'll give you a record deal if you let me do this to you"? Because we've all heard those types of rumors, right? We heard about Lil Wayne, and we've seen videos of rappers come out and say, "Yeah, Birdman fucked me," or whatever. So we know there's rumors about that. So allegedly, uh, this guy told me, yes, he does rape these guys. So I'm gonna keep saying allegedly, because I don't want these people to come after me. But and I straight up asked him about the rapper that I had a crush on and stuff. I was like, "What about him? Like, did it happen to him?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Holy shit." And he talked to me about a lot of other stuff, just about a lot of crazy shit, like, um uh a lot of people talk about the music industry in Hollywood being satanic, or being stuff like that, like a lot of stuff related to that. But what we discussed is just that, I think that a lot of these celebrities, especially the high up celebrities, we talked about how they do try to worship these types of, like, forces. Like, they try to worship Satan. They try to work with low-ranking demons and mess with the occult. They try to do dark magic and things like that. I think it ranges with everybody. And like, with these people that are doing all this stuff, like, to me, I think it's more of like a mind trick. Like, I think, they're putting all this energy into darkness and everything. And so that's what they're going to get back. I've looked into all this type of stuff, and from what I found out, no, you cannot sell your soul. Like, I think that's kind of a myth in the music industry, is that you cannot sell your soul, because your soul does not belong to you. Whether it's any religion or just spirituality, every religion either says God owns your soul and has taken upon himself to take care of you, or whatever, died for your sins, or we're just made of massive energy from the universe, and it's just completely science-based. So no, we don't own our souls. We cannot sell it. We cannot do anything with it. It just is, and it's just bees. And so we talked a lot about that stuff. He confirmed with me other celebrities that was just straight up trying to sell their soul and do all this stuff. And we predicted a lot of stuff. I'm gonna say allegedly on this too, but this was back before Travis Scott had that wild ass concert where a lot of people died. But we talked about Travis Scott, and we were like, yeah, he allegedly worships that kind of shit, and he's gonna get it coming back to him like very fast. And I was like, like at that point, I had had religious trauma in the past. I, turned away from God and things like that. And my spirituality is just, I kind of think that everything is right in a way. I kind of think that every religion has its truths, and I think that we are still very powerful beings with the type of energy that we have, and just the fact that in science energy cannot be destroyed, right? So he confirmed, we talked about this with Travis Scott allegedly, and this was before that concert happened, and we were like, yeah, it's gonna come back to him. And then the years later that happens, and I'm straight up like, holy shit, like that guy was right, and I never asked the Cash Money rapper himself, because I wasn't gonna out him like that. We just wanted to have a fun time, and I kept that information to myself, because I was like, it's not necessary to bring it up. Like, if it really happened, he probably doesn't want to talk about it, and if it didn't happen, it would be insulting to insinuate that it did. So allegedly, all of this stuff was confirmed to me by somebody that whose family worked in Warner Brothers Entertainment and was friends with these rappers and things like that, and was selling drugs and everything. I mean, so much crazy stuff happened during that time that I was even like, I was kind of still in psychosis some of the time. And so I straight up was like, yeah, like put me in the game, like I want to sell drugs too, because I'm not making any money. Like, I can't hold a job. And he was like, okay, bet. And he's like, let's meet with my supplier at this house or whatever. And thank fucking God, I was not okay, and I took the wrong directions, and I showed up at the wrong house. So I didn't even know where I was. And then eventually I just went home. And it's crazy that like I was that close to getting involved with these types of people. But once I started feeling better, and once my medication started kicking in, and I stopped having my psychosis symptoms, like I looked back on all this and I could remember it all, and I was just like in awe of all the stuff that I got myself into when I was in psychosis and when I was dealing with my rape. Because obviously people are going to hear all this and going to talk about, oh, she's a hoe because she was hooking up with all these people. I was dealing with my rape back then. A lot of victims, they get really hypersexual after they start dealing with that type of stuff. And unfortunately, that was my process of dealing with it. And luckily, it's not like that today, but I had my years of partying and being around many people. And I'm also going to say that even as a minor, I had access to this type of stuff, being a photographer and stuff, but I always had my boyfriend around me, and I never like went to those after parties. I never went to those, things or whatever afterwards. So we just would go home, or he would drop me off at home, because that was back when I was in high school. He didn't live with me then. So it's just crazy shit what's available to minors, and what the high up people supposedly do allegedly, like it's just crazy the types of things that have been said to me. And I've backed out of the music industry a little bit, and I've kept to myself about this stuff. But then I start seeing like other people talk about this shit. I start seeing people like Jaguar Wright, coming out about what she witnessed when she was in the music industry and stuff. And it's like, I think it's so unfortunate that allegedly, if Birdman is doing this, this is one of the most evil things that I could possibly think of, to be honest. It's just like another P. Diddy, Like, in my opinion, allegedly, yeah, he's probably going to be the next P. Diddy. He's probably going to have a case on him. But I can't know that for sure, because I'm not, I don't know the inside details, anymore. So it's just, I wanted to talk about that, because I hate that if it's really true that he does that, I hate that he does that, And I know I have to keep seeing allegedly and if and all that stuff, but people can put two and two together and know what I'm saying.
And it's not surprising, knowing what we know about the entertainment industry, whether it's Disney, whether it's these child stars that are groomed through Nickelodeon, Disney, and then grow up. the Mickey Mouse Club, and then just, Hollywood in general, all the different, whether it's trafficking, whether it's mind control, different abuses. There's a lot excused in the entertainment industry, and there's a lot, even with the P. Diddy thing, it's like, how aren't people just, like, outraged by that? Like, it's almost like entertainment, like, people hear it and it's, like, entertaining for them like a movie. It's not something that they care about to where it's like, "Wait, like, this is fucked up. Like, why are we standing for this? Why aren't we outraged that, this stuff is happening?" People just wanna know because it's, like, entertainment, and when you actually hear it from, like, your perspective that, like, this is real life, this is, like, people's lives. These are, like, women and men that are being abused, and it's covered up because of fame and entertainment, and it's something that's being excused heavily. So I really appreciate you shining a light on that because it validates so many other people's stories, and it can be really scary to speak out on this because, these people are looked at as powerful. They have a lot of connections, and it can be really intimidating coming out and saying, there could be something going on, or allegedly I heard this, or this is kind of like the word on the street. And with your story, you look at all the divine intervention, like you were around so many things that could have put you in just, the same situation that you were trying to get out of over and over and over again. Like you could have ended up being a trafficking victim in that, and to think about all the like the divine interventions of, taking a misdirection and showing up at a different house. It's like you had angels around you that were guarding you as much as possible. I know that it wasn't perfect. You went through horror beyond horror, with what you experienced and the repercussions of that, and the side effects, and, psychosis. Like it has not been an easy journey for you. And I'm so grateful that you were saved from, having to go deeper down that rabbit hole into even more darkness. It was like whatever was watching out for you, angels, God, the universe, it was trying to pull you out of that as much as possible and like keep you from it. And I think that that's amazing. So you started your healing journey sort of after the trial. You started reckoning with what was happening to you and were able to process more, talk about it the first time. Talk about that journey and what led you to wanting to speak out, and what that time period was.
So, like, after my trial, like I said, like my dad died and the pandemic happened. So for a while, like I was just kind of going with life and on life's terms and shit, you know? So there was not a lot that I did in my healing during the pandemic and all that, like because everything was virtual. After the pandemic started lifting, I started trying to get more help and stuff. And eventually I started going to a couple more dual diagnosis centers. And eventually there was one that I went to where a therapist said she needs a trauma therapist to help her with this PTSD type stuff. And I had heard of a trauma therapist, but I didn't really, I almost thought was like, does that really apply to me? Like, but it does. So I end up trying to find this trauma therapist, and I found a really good person that I connect with and stuff. And I contacted her about probably a year or so ago now. And I started immediately doing EMDR. I started talking about what was going on with me, and I was finally getting tools to deal with this type of thing. And also, the EMDR helped tremendously. And I also started trying to get on different medication to help me. I mean, I had nightmares like almost every night for a long time. And then I was told about this PTSD medication called Prozozin. So I started taking that, and that helps with my dreams a lot. Because most of the time I don't dream, or most of the time, I have a bad dream here and there, but it's not really, that bad usually. And so things just started like rolling in a good direction, and I started really feeling like I was gaining like a lot of positive stuff in my life and helping myself mentally, because my anxiety attacks started going down. I started, like just just feeling differently, Especially the EMDR, I would highly recommend if you have access to somebody who is certified. specifically certified in this modality of therapy, I recommend that you try it. There's also brain spotting. That's another kind of a similar thing to EMDR. So I started doing that, and that was like last year and stuff, and that was really when the ball started rolling on like me feeling better. Because like before, like yeah, I was dealing with it, but I was just doing talk therapy. I was just kind of going through these programs where they teach you how to breathe and that's it, and so like I got to this trauma therapist and life started changing then. And so last year, towards the end of the year, in September, although it was filmed in August, but aired in September, I did a soft white underbelly interview after contacting Mark Lyda's team. And
There you are.
yeah, like I went on there and I did that. And
And for
then
people that are like not familiar with this channel, it has 5.5 million subscribers. Like this isn't just like, this is a big deal. Like your first time speaking out and you go on this massive podcast. So continue what you're doing, but I wanted to show people so they could go check it out.
yeah, cool. Thank you for that. So yeah, like I went on that interview and like I felt really good about it. Like I felt different for the first time, like because before I had only spoken about my rape to law enforcement, close friends or family, and that was it. And like my boyfriend at the time, and that was it. I had never told anybody else. I had never posted about it on social media. I never came out about it. I never told anybody that didn't need to know I felt. But then after the soft white underbelly interview and then seeing how many views it was getting and then seeing all the comments of other survivors just like, just talking and saying like this interview helped me or this and this so and so, like it's amazing the type of reaction you get when you go out of your way to like talk and like talk about things that are happening or talk about what happened to you because somebody else has gone through what you have. And so after that and after it was getting views, I started posting about it on social media. I started posting about my story. I started trying to get together specific social media for it, like separate from my personal accounts. Um, so I started posting about it on TikTok and stuff like that. And eventually this other person found me and she DM'd me and she was asking me about my case. And then eventually she told me like, yeah, like I'm another victim of Kevin Ahern. And I was like, holy, like that was crazy. Like all from just posting about it on the internet, she found me and she just ran up. So I talked with her a bit and we were she wanted to talk with the DA and the investigators that were supposedly on my case. And I kept speaking with the DA and I kept saying, here's her information. Like, are we doing anything? And they were like, yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. And then a couple months ago, probably actually back in January or like February or something, I called again and I was straight up like, look, like what are we gonna do about this victim coming forward? She may have relevant information. Like, why are we not why are we stalling? Why aren't we moving quickly? And that's when the DA, the current DA that I guess handles my case or is my current contact, that's when he straight up said, like, oh, like, no, your case is just straight up closed. You have no investigators from the DA on this case. Like, you are completely, we are not going to investigate this. We're not doing anything about it. They said you have to, she has to report her rape on her own to law enforcement, then maybe we'll do something about it. But it's like the DAs are not going to see that. There's tons of rape cases that go in every day, and some people don't even get as far as getting a report in. So, like, are you kidding me? Like, you're going to wait until you see it on your end, which is not even guaranteed because this is the DA's office and not everybody's case goes through. Like, it after that, I started kind of declining a little bit. Like, I started just feeling kind of like defeated. And started having my anxiety attacks at night again, started like not feeling well again most of the time, and I started getting really angry. And so then I think that just fueled me more to talk about it more on social media. And I just wanted to say everything and out everything and try to do something because nobody was trying to find him. And so, after that phone call happened and after I was dealing with it for a while, I was like, fuck it. Like, I'm gonna book a bunch of interviews and I'm gonna talk about it and say what's happening, because the case is closed. Like, people need to know that we need to find him. And so I got this idea that I would start a Kickstarter or something to try and, you know, uh, maybe get funds for the book and everything and use the fund to just try anything to like hire a private investigator or get him found, and Kickstarter just completely denied my stuff. I was trying to just make it so that it was selling the book and then sending a thank you or whatever. But they didn't allow my projects and everything. They denied me. So I made a GoFundMe instead. I just labeled it like Find Kevin Ahern and Help His Victim Heal. And it's just a GoFundMe that is for just trying to get funds to fund an independent investigation into this because obviously nobody's doing anything and I don't have the money to do it either. So I'm trying to get funds for that and trying to find him, get him off the streets, or find out any information I can about him. Um, and that was that. So I did a second soft white underbelly interview that I talked about on Twitter and everything, and I talked about that I was doing this interview, and so that's where we're at now. Like, I'm gonna try and see where we go from here.
Has there been any other advancements at all? As far as I know that you had this other person come forward. Do you have any hunches where he could be or any gut feelings? Is he still on Facebook? Have you had anything else, or is it just, stagnant, nobody's looking for him, he's gone somewhere, and hopefully these interviews help shine a light on it.
Yeah, so I tried just looking stuff up on my own, of course, and like, I mean, I found out that him and his surrounding people would like go by aliases, tons of aliases all the time. So I found one of his aliases, which was like Ceven Gray. And I was like, okay, and I never saw that account or any of those accounts because they were taken down or something. But I saw that people had tagged this specific person and it was him. And I saw that his other people that were surrounded by him, like there was a girl that testified for him on during my trial, and she said that she was the one that found that fake evidence. Um and like, yeah, sorry, what was the question? Because I just get on such a like,
Oh, no, you're good. That you pretty much answered it. I asked if there was like any other cues or clues as to where he could be or anything else that you've stumbled on since the beginning of this year.
Yeah, the other thing is like I really don't know where he could be. The only hunches that I have is either he's still in the US or still in California, or he did the same thing that he did in his first case, which was flee to Mexico. So those are kind of my two like uh ideas of where he could be, but that's about it.
Right. And so I think, you doing these interviews, it's for one, you're bringing awareness. For two, you're getting to share your story and your testimony so it's on record. And for three, like my great hope is that you doing this gives the courage for other victims to come forth because obviously it seems like he's, just one after the other. And then they can help sort of corroborate what you're saying. And maybe somebody on the other end of one of these interviews has seen him or knows where he's at and can help your case, help you and these other victims get justice by actually holding him accountable and not letting him run away.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, I mean, he's been gone since 2018, so it's just like it's been years, so like where could he be now? Sorry, that's my dog.
It's okay. And
Can we
so,
pause can we pause for a second? Because
yeah,
I'll
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, my mom's gonna get my dog
Yeah,
so
no
that she's
worries.
not click clacking.
Yeah, no worries at all. My dog's just laying here on the floor too. They're so sweet. Happy Mother's
Okay.
Day to your mama too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, hopefully maybe we'll do something after this. I don't know, but we'll see.
And
So,
yep, so
yeah,
go ahead and continue where you left off.
I don't remember where I left off.
So let's do this. I'll just ask you a question and then I'll delete everything, just that little part. So where does this leave you? You're speaking out now. You mentioned a book if you want to talk a little bit about that. Um, how can people support you and what are some things on the horizon for you if there is anything that you've thought about doing?
Okay, so I did make a GoFundMe for finding him, so I hope people support that. Um I do post about this like on social media, so I would love for people to support, or even if they need somebody to talk to about their certain situations, like I am an open book. Like you can ask me questions, and if you need to, like I'm just such an open like person to try and not only try and find him, but try and help other survivors. So I'm trying to do these interviews, and yes, like that's the GoFundMe. So with the GoFundMe, I'm trying to launch an independent investigation on my own to see if, we can find him or something and get him off the streets. And with and I have this set up to where everything does go to, private investigators or stuff for this independent investigation. And if there's anything left over, like say we find him and then those services are not needed anymore, I would only be using the rest of the money for my therapy and things like that, for my personal healing journey. Because as much therapy as I've had, it is it is very expensive, because I go to out of insurance people so that, they're not bound by insurances and things like that. So I'm paying out of pocket for all of my therapy and things like that. So trying to find him, like if you want to help with the GoFundMe, if you want to just share the GoFundMe, you do not have, I'm not trying to make anyone by any means give me money. Like a lot of people out here do not have the money for their own groceries. I understand that. Feel free to share it. Feel free to follow me on social media. Anywhere you can search, I am Sizone Shaw 1, and that's spelled SEIZONSHA 1. And how I came up with that is I just looked up the Japanese word for survivor, and that's what I came up with. So that's me on all my social medias. I do have a link tree, and I'll keep adding to the link tree if anything more comes out. And I don't know, like maybe through talking with you or talking with other people and knowing we're probably we might be a lot closer than we think in a while. So maybe I would try and even start my own podcast and try and talk about these topics that are important to talk about, and start letting other people speak and things like that, and try and bring to light all this types of information, especially anywhere from the individualistic type of rapes where people just take victims on their own just one by one and they don't work with anybody, all the way to people that are networking high up and things like that. So hopefully you know things move forward. Hopefully we're able to find him. That would be the greatest what's it called, conclusion to this. That would be the greatest conclusion to this. So yeah, just whatever anybody feels in their heart they want to do, that's all I say to do, because I can tell you what I need, but only you can have it in your heart to see what you can help me with or anything that you can support me with. So that's an open door for anybody.
Amazing. I think you're so brave. Like I said, whenever we found each other on social media, I was just like, this girl has a freaking just warrior spirit. Like, you are just out. They fucked with the wrong girl. Like, they thought you were this, he thought you were like this vulnerable girl who'd probably keep quiet like a lot of people would and do. And you just, by all means, like you've just defied that somehow. And like I said, I feel like you've had angels by your side and divine guidance ever since to like lead you to this place where you could be in a place to speak on behalf of yourself and on behalf of all these other victims, and not just with this case, but there's a lot that goes on in your area too. Like you're helping bringing awareness to just the California environment and how prolific, trafficking, rape, abuse, mind control, like all of it. Like you're really in a hub, and even though there are people in your area that have spoken out and are probably trying to be able to bring a case forward that actually went to court, to be able to talk about this and to be able to, speak on behalf of people who are just trying to like, survive. You're really a hero, Caitlin, for being able to, come forth and do this and for choosing this hard path because, you know, speaking out, people always, give us names, give us this. Everybody needs to come speak out. But what people don't realize is like you wear a target on your back whenever you decide to come forward. Like not everybody's happy that you're speaking out. And luckily, like we have an amazing survivor community that has just embraced you, and supports you. And you can tell from the soft white underbelly interview that you did, all the amazing comments underneath, like more people than not are supporting you on this, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it is extreme courage to come share what you have, to share these very vulnerable details of, moments that are so easy to like carry shame and guilt about because you know that it's for something bigger than you, because it's to serve you and hopefully get you justice and to help people, understand that this stuff is real. But in knowing that, there's a man out there, one of many that are out there, and we have his name, we have his identity. He's not like hiding in the shadows anymore like a lot of these perpetrators that are never exposed. Like we can catch him if people can provide information on where he is. If we as a community come forth and support you on your efforts to get a private investigator, to support all these fees and this time that it takes for you to be in and out of court, to hire people, and to even just resource your own things if you want to start a podcast and bring awareness to it that way. Like it costs money to do all of this, so I ask people on the other side, like she said, she's not necessarily asking everybody listening to contribute, but if you guys could go share the link at least, and help bring awareness to this case, even if it's just people being aware, even if, especially in like the California, Mexico area, if we can just show people that picture that she posted of him, the information, Kevin's name, it might lead to helping, other leads come forward and give information to help find him. That's what we want. And it might not even cost money. Maybe it's just sharing the GoFundMe enough to where it sees enough people and somebody recognizes him and reports him. So, and
Yeah.
then at the very least, if you guys have $5, $10 more, that you're looking to give to a good cause, it's always awesome to just go right to the source, instead of contributing to these 501(c)(3)s and these people that are, doing things on behalf of survivors. It's really helpful to just go right to the source. A lot of you ask me, what can I do to help now that I know? And that's always my long and short answer is to go look through my library, connect with these survivors, and I always link everything in the show notes for you guys if they have donation links or ways that you can support them. And to do that, we need to bring more justice to this. And this guy he already was accused 7 times. Like he has 7 uh verdicts.
He's so we have like 3 victims so far, like me and the first one and then the third one, but I'm sure there are many, many more. And so the first case, I think he had 4 guilty counts. My case, he had 7 guilty counts. I mean, there's so much there,
In the bag. We just have to locate him. It's not even like a question of if he's guilty. Like he's already been accused of being guilty in a court of law. Like all we need to do is find him, and hopefully with all of our efforts coming forth, we can do that. And Kaylin, is there anything else that we didn't get to talk about today? Anything else that you wanted to share today before we start wrapping up?
No, I really can't think of anything. I can tell, like, I can't believe I was talking this long, so I think we got a lot of information out there.
We did. This was phenomenal, and your story covers so much ground, and at such a young age too. It's really important that we as a society like understand the dangers of online and understand how easy it is, for kids these days to whether it's like lie about where they're at or to get caught up in these things. Parents really have to be aware of what their children are doing, and we have to educate kids on this stuff too. Like, it's so crazy to me that like you went to this school and like there was no education on, whether it's boundaries and consent, or if it's just how your body works and how the anatomy of a human being works when it comes to sexuality. So, there's a lot that we can learn from your story, Caitlin. And I just thank you again. I know that you're newer to speaking out, and it's an honor that you chose here to come share your story along with these other amazing platforms, and if you guys have a podcast, if anybody listening, I'll have all Caitlin's information below. You guys can go contact her and invite her on. I always encourage you guys to go follow survivors. That's one of the ways that you can do something for free. If we have eyes on these survivors, it shows the enemy that we're watching them and that we have their back. So I encourage you guys to go follow Caitlin's story, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. I'll have all of that linked below also. And she's very active on all the platforms. So if you guys have information, contact her. If you guys want to find other ways to support, or else if you can contribute, if you're a private investigator and want to do something out of the generosity of your heart to help, please reach out to her if you guys have any connections that could possibly help. Like I said, like this guy is in the bag, we just have to locate him. So this should be something that if we all come together, we could make a really big impact and possibly help a lot of victims get justice, and it might lead to more. He could be involved with more people. If we bring him down, it could lead to other connections that he has that could be possibly, brought down with him. And, in the LA area, California, we know it's a hub. So this could lead to something really good for survivors and victims. So I encourage you guys to please go support Caitlin, pray over her as she continues speaking out. This does get rough whenever you're speaking about this stuff. The enemy doesn't like it. So I ask that you guys pray spiritual protection, physical protection for her and her family. And Caitlin, just thank you again so much for coming on. This was an honor sharing time with you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have met you, and because you're a really amazing person too. Like, the survivors get the credit for speaking out, but you also have to have credit for allowing them to, and creating a platform like this and continuing to focus on it, not just for a limited short time, but for years now. So I'm thankful for people like you, for people like Mark, and I'm so happy that I get to share my story and everything. And one other thing I want to say is that, like you said, just before, like, that this is bigger than me. It is, of course, so much bigger than me, because even if Kevin is found and everything, I don't think it ends there. I mean, I would like to get laws passed, like mandatory life sentences without parole for rapists, and especially pedophiles. Anybody that gets raped under 18, the rapists have got to go, okay? And that's one thing I would love to accomplish in my lifetime. I think there should also be laws surrounding sexual education. I think it should be mandatory that any school, whether private or public school, needs to have some sort of sex education that passes some sort of thing that, there needs to be topics they need to do in the sexual education stuff. It should be mandatory that these schools educate our children, especially so that they know what to do. And parents out there especially need to watch what their kids are doing. I wholeheartedly believe, if you are a parent and you have a kid, that kid shouldn't get unsupervised things to do, like, as far as the internet goes. Like, if your kid has a Facebook, you need to be looking at all those messages, and you need to know Facebook well enough to see if they archived it and stuff like that. You need to be on top of, okay, because every teenager kind of goes through that rebellious phase. Every kid hides things from their parents. But when it comes to the internet, I think it's very important that parents look and see what is actually going on and stuff. And a lot of people might disagree on that, because we have a lot of iPad kids. We have a lot of kids that get stuck to their couch and then they get their iPad and they're done for the rest of the day after they get home from school, So I think a lot needs to change in society. I mean, there's only so much we can do in a short limited time, but as much as I'm thinking small, I'm also thinking really big. So thank you so much for having me on here.
It was an honor, and that is so exciting. If anybody can contribute to that or help at all with, if you guys have worked with laws and states or know where Caitlin can possibly start, or if you guys have any connections, that's another thing you guys can reach out with her. Maybe we could get a group going to help do this. Every state should have this,
Yeah.
at least have people advocating for it to start. So that's another really exciting thing you guys can connect with Caitlin on if you guys can help. And it's my honor. And I thank Mark too for giving you a platform. I'll post his interviews with you underneath the show notes. So if people want to go check out and support his podcast, you guys can and go watch Caitlin's first interviews. And as always, you guys, thank you so much for supporting. We couldn't do this without you. Go connect with Caitlin. I'll have all of her links in the show notes. They're hyperlinks. So you guys just go in the show notes, click, it'll take you right to all of her platforms. Go support her, go love on her, lift her up, donate to her campaign, reach out and help. Provide any information you guys can if you guys know about Kevin Ahern. And just thank you guys again so much for helping, bring these stories to life and for giving all of these episodes a voice. It's like Caitlin said, like it takes a group effort. So I can record, Caitlin can talk, but without you guys listening and sharing, we just be talking into a black hole. So we really appreciate your guys' support. It means so much. So you guys, thank you so much. God bless you, and we will see you next time.